What did that look like in compared to today's Radio Row?
It honestly looks pretty similar. I will say this: every Radio Row is different. Like I remember the Houston one was in the George R. Brown Convention Center, and it was very similar to this giant layout. Then the next year, the Minnesota Super Bowl, it was that Eagles Patriots Super Bowl. We were in the Mall of America in a food court, so it was tight. You were crammed up against everyone.
Wow.
This so far, really nice layout as far as the space. I've never seen this many tables this spread out, so I think you guys got a pretty good draw here.
Oh.
There's a lot of room.
That's good to hear.
Yeah, I mean, it's great. I have to say, it's just great to be in like a really nice city. Like
Yes.
you mentioned, like, you know, going to Houston, like having the opportunity, like last year was Vegas, like some of my friends went to Vegas. Having the opportunity to be in New Orleans is really cool. Is this your first time in NOLA?
First ever time. And
Wow.
it's funny because I did radio in Houston for almost 6 years, and New Orleans and Houston, about 4-hour drive. A lot of people from New Orleans live in Houston. A lot of LSU alumni move to the Houston area. So I've never made it here though, so I'm excited to be here for the week and check it out. I've heard the stories. I guess we'll see if it lives up to the hype.
Awesome. Now, of course, being an Ithaca alum, how do you think that shaped your college career and just you as a person in general?
It was amazing for the hands-on experience. Like, you guys could speak to it too.
Yeah.
I mean, as a freshman, within 2 weeks, I was doing a sports update on VIC. You know, I don't think you get that
Did they
opportunity.
throw you on morning drive?
No, they did not.
Ah, you're lucky. I got thrown on morning drive.
Yeah. I think I don't even know. You had to earn morning drive back in my day. Well, at least that's what it was for WICB. And I'm not a morning person, so I just remember trying to get up and do like like a 6:28 cast or what? Maybe it was the 46 on WICB. Whatever it
it's
was.
40, look, you're sharp. It's 46.
Is
There
it
you go.
46 still?
Yeah, it's still 46.
It's been a bit. I feel old even like talking to you guys. Like, back in
No.
my day, but the opportunity to be on the air as a freshman right away, and then you get to kind of work your way up, but you're getting hands-on experience. Like, with all due respect to all the amazing professors in the Park School, there's no like intro to being a sports talk show host. So like your on-air experience is you putting in the time at ICB and VIC and ICTV and doing it yourself, and that's what I love so much about Ithaca.
And you
Awesome.
mentioned becoming a sports talk radio host. You grew up listening to sports talk radio, as did I. Give me that show. What was that show? Was it a show that you listened to by yourself? Going to a baseball game with your dad? Like I grew up listening to Boomer and Carter with my dad in those afternoons. I want to hear the show that really got you into sports radio.
I'll tell you what, Craig Carton came on the Asman and Budick show on WICB
No
when
way.
we were in Houston at Radio Row. He was one of our big guests that week, and he couldn't have been nicer, and it was an awesome time. So
That's awesome.
Quick aside on that, but just like you, I grew up listening to Boomer and Carton. I grew up listening to the Michael K show with Don LaGreca and Michael. And I work with those guys now, so it's pretty surreal to go from a listener to like a coworker of Michael and Don's. I grew up listening to Joe and Evan. I have Joe Beningo on my YouTube show
That's
every
awesome.
Monday talking about the Jets. Joe was on with me when Robert Saleh got fired. And if you would have told 12-year-old Jake Asman, he'd be friends with Joe Beningo, who I grew up listening to.
Surreal.
I would never believe it. So those were some of the shows. It was Joe and Evan, the Michael K show. I'm old enough. Once again, you're making me sound old, but I'm old enough to
stop it.
remember listening to Mike and the Mad Dog in
Yeah.
their heyday. So I got that at the beginning of my sports radio journey. So yeah, I mean, you kind of just immerse yourself in it as a kid, and then you're like, wait a second, these people are doing this for a living, like talking about sports, and the rest was history. You and I have a very unique relationship because
Yes.
you had a high school radio station in
Yes.
Plainview. I had Syosset. So
I should have mentioned that. So Jake is from Syosset. He is WKWZ. I'm from the neighboring town, Older, WPOB. However, we do share the airwaves. We were both 88.5. A cool little connection. But I want to get to the start of your career. You started in Houston after Ithaca, and then you get back in your own market. Not only having the opportunity to work in New York sports, something you grew up to, but what was that transition like going from Houston back to New York?
I've been asked that before. Honestly, maybe I'm so just immersed in just doing the work. It felt like home. I never actually, I live in Manhattan now. I never actually lived in Manhattan, but I worked in Manhattan before. Before I even moved to Houston, I did about a year as a part-time producer at the Fan. So
Okay.
I was going, to the station a couple times a week part-time and kind of just trying to get some experience that way. And friends, family, they live in the cities, and I'm from Long Island, so it was very easy to go back from Houston to New York. Originally moving to Houston, that was obviously a lot different than what I was accustomed to, but I loved my time in Houston, and it's pretty cool. It was a full circle moment for me. That was my first full-time job in Houston, and my first ever time in Houston was with WICB at the Super Bowl a year prior to that.
Awesome. Now, of course, your time living in Ithaca as a college student, is there a specific spot for our Ithaca natives listening that you remember that was your favorite? Whether it's just a spot to hang out, a food spot, what's something that comes to mind?
I mean, can I say the Moon Shadow Tavern?
Of
Can I
course.
say Mooney's?
Yeah.
I mean,
I have an off-air update for you about that place
Yes.
after the show. I think there's been a little bit of a change
Yeah.
about the Moon Shadow Tavern.
well, I'll tell you, off-air update. I can tell you, I somehow was able to go to Mooney's for 4 years. I'm just gonna leave it at that. No, Mooney's was great. Going out with all my friends. I mean, we also it's not around anymore, but right across from Mooney's used to be a bar called Two Floor.
Okay.
And they were like, it was like the Yankees
Yes.
and the Red
So-
Sox. It was like a rivalry, but
so
you
you-
get
Yeah.
you would have
so
options.
you brought up Two Floor. I guess
Yeah.
it became the Range, which also just
closed.
recently
Oh, the Rangers
Yes.
got now too.
Yes.
Man, that's tough. What about are the two pizza places still there?
A
Remind me.
What's that?
There- on each side-
ICO? Or
It's so funny because I just walk into the place.
It's
I
like in
don't-
the corner. It's like there's
Yes.
one like on each side of like in the commons, like
There-
towards Mooney's down
Yes.
the corner.
Just
oh
to the
yes,
right.
yes, yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes.
And then the
Yes.
other side, there's another pizza
by
place.
the bus stop.
Yes.
Yep.
Those
Those
are
are
both
still there.
up and running. It's unfortunate because the pizza in Ithaca is so much. It's just not on
It-
par to New
no,
York pizza.
it's
It's really
not.
disappointing.
But
No, but
you get through it.
I'll tell you what. Like you live in Texas, as
You
bad as it
appreciate-
might be, you really appreciate all sorts
That's
of
true.
Ithaca pizza after you deal with Texas pizza.
Wow.
It's even worse.
Yeah.
Well, we are very lucky with New York pizza. However, and me are both not very lucky with our fandom. I am a Giant fan. You
Me
are
as well.
a die-hard Jet fan. How did Jake Asman become a Jet fan? And do you regret becoming a Jet fan?
I didn't have a choice. It was my dad.
Yeah, I'm
like,
the same way.
Like my dad and my grandpa were season ticket holders at Shea Stadium. Like my dad's favorite player was Namath as a kid. So like I didn't have a choice. Now thankfully, I'm a Yankees fan, so I've seen one of my teams win a championship. But that's only because my dad didn't care about baseball. My uncle did. He took me to my first game, so I at least have that. But I mean, could you imagine being the Met fan? I mean, that'd be a nightmare. So
Yeah.
thank God I don't have that. But I didn't have a choice. Like my dad basically he grew up watching the games, took me to games, watching on TV. So I was going to be a Jet fan, whether I liked it or not. And it would have been nice to be a Giant fan. You at least have seen some championships. I haven't.
So I always say I was alive for 2, conscious for 1. I was 2.5 when they won in 07.
Oh my God! Yeah, now
so-
I really feel you were 2.5.
Yeah, but yeah,
2007
I
you were
do
2.5?
remember. I mean, 2011 was like I could tell you where I was for every game. That was like the greatest. But I peaked as a 7-year-old. So
Wow.
I wouldn't say it's been great, and I'd say we're arguably in a worse position than you guys are now. But I know Lindsay has a question about
Yes.
the state of the Jets.
Yeah, so like you said, being like a Jets fan, it could be painful sometimes. Rank that amongst the most painful teams to root for. Where would you rank that?
My personal teams I root for.
In all of do both.
Yeah,
That and
yeah.
all of sports.
I mean, I would argue being a Jet fan is one of the worst experiences in all of sports because, I mean, think about it. They have the longest playoff drought in sports right now.
Mm-hmm.
We have all this hype and excitement the last 2 years for it to be as bad as it could possibly be. I mean, they won 7 games last year without Aaron Rodgers. You get Aaron Rodgers back this year, and he plays all 17 games. They somehow only won 5 games. It's
Right.
just, the coach gets fired in season. The GM, it was a nightmare. These last 2 years have been the worst ever. And so recent bias, I'd say it's right up there with any. But of the teams I root for, because I make my living talking about them on YouTube, and I can't escape it. I would say that's the worst. I would say being a Knicks fan was the second worst, but now they're at least really
now,
good.
yeah,
We're
they're
so
coming
back.
back up.
It's great.
So
It's awesome.
nice to see that.
I can't really complain about the Yankees. I've seen them win a
course
championship
not.
before. They were just in the World Series.
Yep.
And then I'm an Islander fan too,
Okay.
but they're not great, but they just were in the conference
We're
finals
almost
a few years
completely
ago.
opposite of the spectrum.
Yeah?
I'm Rangers, Mets, Giants, and then Knicks. So at least go Knicks. But I want to ask you about. I have a quick question on Rodgers. Would you have rather Rodgers sign with the Jets, looking back on it, or just avoided the saga completely?
No, I think it was the right move. I
Okay.
mean, you look back at the other options, right? I mean, you weren't going to go with Zach Wilson for a third year.
Yeah.
You ended up have to, which was a huge mistake, not having a better backup. But, I mean, the other options that offseason were Derek Carr, Jimmy Garoppolo.
Yeah.
I don't think they would have been better off. I think they took the swing on Rodgers. He got hurt, and we'll never know what it would have been like
Exactly.
if he didn't suffer the Achilles injury. And unfortunately with that, it basically gave the entire coaching staff a mulligan because it's like, well, you can't fire Saleh and the staff when Rodgers only played 4 plays. But in reality, if you were only going to give Robert Saleh 5 games with Rodgers this
Right.
year, he should have been gone last year because
Yeah.
that was a completely misguided decision. So, no, it ultimately it didn't work. But I guess my frustration is when people just put it all on Aaron Rodgers. It's like the defense completely collapsed this year. The kicking game cost him anywhere from 2 to 3 games. And, despite all that, he still threw 28 touchdowns
Yeah.
against 11 interceptions. That's the best statistical season by a Jet quarterback in a decade.
Yeah.
So, was he great? No. He's also coming off an Achilles, and he's old. He played well enough if the rest of the team didn't regress the way it did. And I guess we'll never know, but it was as bad of a season as you can get.
And I'm glad you brought up Robert Saleh, because the whole reason he was hired, really good defensive coordinator, culture guy, didn't work. Now the Jets go out and get Aaron Glenn, who fits that description perfectly.
Yep.
Very, very good defensive coordinator, culture guy. However, I think the way that he's building his staff is a little differently. You got some, younger coordinators around him. I love the general manager they hired as well. What is your thoughts on the future of this Jets coaching staff led by Aaron Glenn and the new GM as well?
It's a giant unknown because you're talking about a first-time coach, first-time GM. So you have to hope they made the right choice. But I will say this for Glenn. I was someone who didn't want any first-timer. I wanted someone with previous head coaching experience. The way he sounded at the press conference, the way he dealt with the media, it was impressive. He didn't sound like your typical first-time coach. I think it has a lot to do with the fact he played for the team.
Yeah.
He's been a scout with the team. He understands what he's walking into. I think Robert Saleh was supposed to be what you were saying, rah-rah, culture guy. And he tried to be everyone's friend. And he didn't have that same energy that he had as a coordinator when he became the head coach. I think Aaron Glenn's authentically himself, and I think he's not going to be afraid to have tough conversations with players, hold guys accountable. You just never know with any first-timer, and he's going to have to figure out a quarterback at some point here, because he could be the best coach in the world. If his quarterback's awful, he's not going to have the job for that long.
So you tell me, what is the quarterback solution for the New York Jets in 2026? Yeah.
Well,
2025, 2026,
yeah,
if they make the playoffs.
I'm
a year off.
No, you're right. I mean, what I would do is I'd keep Aaron for one more year, assuming he'd take a pay cut to kind of mitigate some of the cap concerns from moving on from him after one more year. I think he's their best option to be a bridge quarterback. You could draft someone this year that sits. Maybe you do it at the end of the first round. You trade back in like what the Ravens did when they still had Flacco. You could do it on day 2 with your second-round pick. But, me personally, I'd keep him for one more year. I'd bring back Devontae Adams, have him, Garrett, Brees, Devontae, and try and fix the defense with Glenn and this new coaching staff and try and be competitive. I look at what the Buffalo Bills did when they ended their playoff drought with Tyrod Taylor, Sean McDermott in his first year, and then they traded up and got Josh Allen the following year. They took a step back record-wise, but you felt good about their direction going forward because they ended that huge playoff drought the previous year. I think that's what Aaron Glenn needs to do, win as many games as possible. And unless someone tells me what a better option is at quarterback than Rodgers, I still think him as the bridge for one more year is their best option.
Listen, I don't have the answer for you, to be quite honest with you. I agree. I think it has to be Rodgers.
Yeah, and going off that, do you think the Jets will make the playoffs?
I mean, if I was betting on it, I'd say no. But, crazier things have happened. I mean, unless you're the Jets, there's 4 teams every year on average that were not playoff teams the previous year that make it the following year. So, could they do it? Sure. I mean, there's talent on this team. I think that's what's so frustrating being a fan of the Jets. They have good players. Like, I've seen some awful Jets teams. They're not going to be any good. This team has talent. There's a reason why they were favorites in all these games. There's a reason why they were still able to win 7 games with Zach Wilson, Tim Boyle, and Trevor Siemian last year. There's existing talent on this team, and if you get the right coach who can harness that talent, they have a chance. It's not the craziest thing in the world with 7 teams making it now in each conference.
And we're here on Radio Row, so I have to add. Now we got to get into some Super Bowl talk, but I have to ask first, resident Jet fan, does it sting you a little bit to see Mekhi Becton thriving in a role in the Philadelphia Eagles and now playing in a Super Bowl? Is it kind of just like, he was in the wrong place, wrong time. They tried him at the wrong position, trying with tackle. He's clearly better as a guard. Does that ruffle your feathers at all as a Jets fan?
So that doesn't ruffle my feathers. What annoys me is he wouldn't play guard for the Jets.
Really?
He said he would only play tackle, and he had the tweet, "I'm a left tackle." Like, no, man, you haven't played in 2 years. You can't stay on the field. You can eat the cheeseburgers all you want, but get into shape. And then, I don't know, if you go out there and play to your talent, he'd still be on the Jets right now if he took better care of himself. So, look, I mean, good for him. He's obviously in a way better situation, but he refused to play any other position for the Jets besides tackle. If he was willing to play guard for the Jets, he might be the Jets guard right now. Who knows? So, I guess that's what frustrates me, but seeing Saquon win pains every Giant fan, so I do get a kick out of that.
Yeah,
I won't lie.
that I have to say, I don't know if you have any opinions on that. Is like, it's the worst because I've said like the last year and a half going back and forth, like, listen, like, I love Saquon, but like, it's the wrong place at the wrong time. He does not make this team better. We do not have the luxury of keeping a running back, but to see him just run his tail off every week and literally just not carry the Eagles, but basically carry the Eagles off, it's killing me. But let's get into this game and Saquon Barkley. He clearly has to be the difference maker for the Philadelphia Eagles. Only won this game, but we know the Chiefs are really good defense. Do you think Saquon, obviously he can do it, but will he do it?
I think he'll have a good game. Part of me just can't pick against the Chiefs right now. I don't want to be the guy that picks against them, and then you're like, well, what are you doing? It's Kansas City. They just find ways to win. I mean, I think Steve Spagnuolo, well as a Giant fan, he's got 2 weeks to come up with a game plan to try and slow down Barkley. I think they're going to dare Jalen Hurts to beat him, and we'll see if he's up for it. He played great a couple of years ago in this matchup, so I think he has it in him. But I mean, Barkley will probably have a good game, but if they could, I don't want to say stop him because he's too good to stop, but if they could limit him. We'll see if Jalen Hurts is going to be able to throw down against this Chiefs defense that I expect to play really well because Spags I have the complete confidence in any big game.
Right.
And sorry.
No, that's okay. I was going to say watching the Chiefs play these past few weekends, what are your thoughts on Mahomes and the refs?
Took the question right out of my mouth.
Must be nice. It must be nice. Like I don't think I get annoyed when people are like it's rigged for the Chiefs. No, what happens is when you're an all-time great team and you're an all-time great quarterback, you get the benefit of the call. I mean, I lived through this with Brady and the Patriots. They would always get calls. Remember, I find it funny. There was an AFC Championship game decided between the Patriots and the Chiefs when D Ford jumped off sides, and the ref called that against the Kansas City Chiefs. So, these things happen when you're talking about all-time greats. Jordan got calls. LeBron gets calls. That's how it goes. I don't think it's rigged. Now, are some of these calls just egregious? Absolutely. But I think it's more the officiating is incompetent more than, the NFL's trying to rig things.
Yeah.
No, they're not. The entire sport would be at risk if it was ever confirmed, if it ever got out that it was rigged. So they get the calls because they're a great team, and that's what typically happens.
The Dean Blandino story that came out the other day, I don't know if you saw that, was really funny, that his brother is fully convinced that the NFL is rigged. But I'm glad you mentioned the Brady dynasty. As a Jet fan, a lot of people like to hate on the Chiefs because they're good. Do you enjoy it because it's finally, for once in your life, not the New England Patriots?
I enjoy it because the more Super Bowls Mahomes wins, there's more to that legitimate debate on could he surpass Brady. And I enjoy the fact that Brady's on the call for Fox and has to potentially watch Mahomes to be the first quarterback ever to be a part of a three-peat. So from that standpoint, I think it's I think it's funny. But I don't hate the Chiefs as much as I've ever hated the Patriots.
Yeah.
And honestly, I didn't love having to do it because I don't love the Chiefs. But I rooted for them against the Bills because I had no choice. I can't root for an AFC East team, just like I'm sure you're rooting for them because you don't want to see the Philadelphia Eagles win.
I really like Patrick Mahomes. I just since he was a rookie, just really I can appreciate how good someone is. So I've always kind of had a little bias towards the Chiefs. It also kind of given me a team to root for the last couple of years. The Giants have been horrible. But, I hope the Chiefs win.
I mean, I'm going to have to disagree with Justin there. I'm hoping the Eagles win just because nothing specific. I'm just rooting for the Eagles. But
You're a Giants fan?
I am a Giants fan.
You're a Giants fan?
I know.
Everything wrong with
know.
sports.
I know.
You can't do that.
I mean,
Come
I don't know.
on.
I think it's just the
You're better than that. No way, Lindsay.
I know. I need to try harder. But obviously, the number one question I'm sure you're going to get asked all week, all day. What are your thoughts on the predictions of the game this weekend?
Say that again?
What are your thoughts on the predictions of the game this weekend?
You're right. I probably
Scores,
will be asked that.
just who's winning in general?
I will say Kansas City wins 31-28.
All right.
I think it'll be a close game.
We got the exact same prediction from Brian Curtis, 31-28.
Brian Curtis is a good man.
Yeah,
I've always said that.
You guys are spot on.
Gotta mean something.
And listen, not that we're promoting it, but heads and tails is both plus 100. Is it heads or tails on the coin toss?
Ooh, tails never fails.
That's what
Until
I'm
it does,
saying.
and you're down money.
Yeah. And of course, you're noted as a Chipotle connoisseur. We really want to know, what is your go-to Chipotle order?
Man, are we talking about the Ithaca Chipotle that has the longest lines of all time?
Oh, wow.
Okay.
That still happened when you went there?
Let's go with every other Chipotle.
Can they open up a second Chipotle in Ithaca?
They
Who do I got to
unfortunately
talk to
did
about
not.
that?
I don't think
it was insane.
I don't think.
Yeah. They opened a second Taco Bell.
The amount of classes I was late to because we were online getting Chipotle.
I just had that horrible experience right before I came here. So
let me guess, too.
Really funny.
You wanted white rice, but they shockingly only had brown rice half the time. Or the chicken wasn't ready.
The opposite happened to me the other day.
You know what the problem is, too? Cortland, and we all know Cortland the worst. They don't have a Chipotle, so Cortland students come all the way from their crappy town to Ithaca to go to the Chipotle, and they increase the lines, and that's why we run out of ingredients at the Ithaca Chipotle.
Yeah.
It's outrageous.
And Cornell too. They got to come on our side of town to steal our Chipotle.
Yeah, well, I have major beef with the Cornell people. They're coming to our bars like, hey, go do your thing on the hill or whatever slope day and leave us alone.
So what?
Yeah, but what's the go-to order?
Oh, all right. So you're gonna look your server in the eye. Don't Grubhub or Uber Eats because they're gonna skimp you on ingredients.
Yep.
Show up, look them in the eyes. You gotta hold them accountable. I go bowl. I feel like an offensive coordinator calling the play right now.
But as you should.
Get brown rice. All right, black beans. Half chicken, half steak. They're gonna give you the same amount as if you just got chicken or steak. So we're all about maximizing your Chipotle order. Then you gotta go mild pico, sour cream, corn. Now, one more key trick here, all right? If you're getting it to go, which many of you guys do, get the guac first and then the cheese on top. If you do cheese then guac, the guac's going to stick to the top of the bowl. It's going to be a mess. So cheese on top over the guac. And if you really want to scheme the system, even if you don't love lettuce, ask for lettuce anyway. It will cover the guac. A lot of times they don't realize you got guac.
Yeah.
I just saved you college kids about $3.
Now, Jake, do you get the vinaigrette?
I have, but
And
I
you don't
haven't
think
done it
that's
recently.
changed? You don't think that's changed the perspective of your taste? It has for me. I have to get it every time I go to Chipotle.
I haven't had it in a while.
Okay.
You've inspired me, Lindsay. I'm going to give it a shot.
I'm
next
glad
time
because it really makes a difference.
And then, are you a water cup, fill it up with soda? Or you at least used to be.
I
want to
bitch that on the air, but I.
Right.
Okay.
Well, if I were to do that, I
Yeah.
would say you get the water cup, and then if you like lemonade, which I do,
Love.
the water and the lemonade they come out of the same system, so you could do a little play action. You could fake like you're getting water, but you're actually getting lemonade.
That's
so,
hey,
I
pro
will
tip,
not.
guys.
I will not confirm or deny that is exactly what I do when I'm at Chipotle. But we have a professional Chipotle orderer, a very passionate Ithaca bomber, Jake Asman. Thank you
Yes.
so much.
Thank you so much
for coming on our radio road show. Really appreciate you coming back, and just appreciating Ithaca College.
Yeah.
I appreciate you guys having me. It's awesome that every year since Dan, Jake Chernock, and myself, we did this, that there's been students from IC that have made this trip. So have fun. It's a blast. This was my favorite week of college when I was an IC student. So enjoy it because it goes by so quick.
Thank you
Yes.
very much.
Thank you so much, Jake.
Jake
You got it, guys.
Asman, ESPN Radio, The Jake Asman Show. Appreciate you coming
Go
on.
follow him.
Here on WICB, Justin Antonucci and Parker Holland are here with Daryl Barnes. Daryl, a Nance winner last year, doing some great work with Front Office Sports. How does it feel to be in New Orleans for Super Bowl Radio Row?
It feels really cool. I'm really excited. I don't know if this is your first radio row.
It is.
This is mine. So I think this is pretty exciting. I'm probably just as giddy and not knowing what's going on as y'all are.
When we have the other reporters on air, when we do our wrap-up show, we ask what the coolest thing that we've seen today is. What's the coolest thing you've seen on Radio Row so far in these first 2 days?
One, just walking around and seeing people whose names and faces that you recognize, voices that you hear. But then two, I was actually just talking to, if you've seen all these little robots roaming around, they are from a local hospital. And so they are basically have these robots where they are bringing around children on Zoom, like some of their kids from their hospital on Zoom, and bringing them into the events all week long. So whether that's, just this stuff here on Radio Row or the parade on Saturday and then pregame on the field on Sunday.
Well, you are an excellent storyteller, and your resume speaks for itself. I want to go to UMiami because I want to go back to your time at UMiami, which I know is only last year, but even starting as a freshman, because we're always taught, especially at school, that sports, it's not just about the game, it's about stories, and you really you're an exceptional storyteller.
I appreciate
But how did that passion start? Was this something as a kid you were always interested in, like the nuts and bolts of sports, or was it just you watch games and you find cool stories and kind of just all mesh together when you started studying sports media?
Can I tell you a secret?
I would love to hear a secret.
I have always gone to schools that I was never supposed to go to.
Okay.
All growing up. Always lied about my address, and then by the time middle school came around, I got caught, which meant I had to go back to the school that I wasn't supposed to go to. But then I found out this little workaround where if you apply to any of the career pathway programs in my school district at for a high school level, each high school had a different career pathway program. One was the gifted program, one was a music program, and then one of them was a broadcast media program.
Look at that.
It was a media and film program. And so I knew that was the school that I was going to lie about my address to get into anyways. So I applied to the media program as a way to go to that high school.
So are you actually from Chicago, or was that all a lie before?
Oh, well, that's just a secret I can't tell.
Ooh,
No,
all right.
I am from Elgin, Illinois, the suburbs of Chicago. This school I wanted to go to was South Elgin. I wanted to go to South Elgin High School instead of Elgin High School because my friends went there. It was newer. My sister went there. And so there they had a broadcast media program called the Beacon Academy of Media and Digital and Media Arts.
Fancy.
Yeah, right? And they're now a magnet school.
Oh, well.
They weren't when I was there. Beacon on the rise. But yeah, so there I basically was forced to take broadcasting and film classes. By the time my sophomore year was up, maybe I'm just a gullible person, but I was hooked. And I was like, you know what? I really like this thing. And my dad always told me, hey, if you do something you love for a living, you never work a day in your life. Now I've learned that I am doing something that I love, but, after 12 hours in a day, it still feels a little bit like work. But I was like, okay, cool. Let's do this thing, trying to talk about sports for a living. Realized my basketball career was not going far. I was riding the pine senior year to the point where some games I would just go and call the game instead of, sitting on the bench. Or I would go and get the scouting report pregame, then call the game before ours, and then go down and play in the game during
That's
ours, like
awesome.
during tournaments. And so that's how I got my start. Then it brought me to Miami because I was a big college television nerd. A big college television nerd. When I was in high school, I was riding the bench, so I would sit there in our weight room after practice, and I would start tuning in to all my favorite college TV shows and all my favorite college programs so that I could decide, hey, which one has the best opportunity for me to go to. And Miami ended up giving me a full academic scholarship, so I was like, you know what, thank you. It means a lot for your wallet, especially in this industry. But yeah, so I ended up going there, and that was when it was like, okay, you know what? I can do this. I have all the opportunity. I showed up my freshman year, and they were like, hey, you know more than a lot of the juniors here. Why don't we just give you all the opportunities that we would be giving to these juniors?
Yeah.
And I'm sorry to the juniors who were juniors, the year of 2020 at Miami, but they gave me those opportunities, and it allowed me to kind of just take it and run.
Well, you were able to, again, like you said, take it and run. You were able to take such a big leap, even once you got there, because you were already great. Then you take the leap. You end up winning the Nance last year. Outside of, obviously, you have a very impressive reel, a lot of great stories in there. Is there one piece that maybe didn't make that cut, that 15 minutes that we all have to submit as college broadcasters, that you think was right on the fringe or maybe holds a special place in your heart?
I'm trying to remember which stories made it into that final reel now.
It can be one that's on it, too. Not everyone listening's seen it. Everyone should. Look it up.
I like to do the reel because it's quick cuts. You just hit, back and forth. It's
clever. That's my thing. I'm like, hey, I think that I'm boring. I think that you can, spice up your personality by adding some quick cuts. I think working in social media has taught me that. I'd say that there's probably two that are pretty near and dear to my heart. I'll give you one that I haven't talked about before, though, and that is, I think the last story on the reel, or maybe I think it's the last story on the reel, is a story about this boxing team this boxing class for people with Parkinson's.
Oh.
So it is this senior citizen boxing class. Everyone in there was 60, 70, 80 years old. And Parkinson's is something that is in my family. My grandmother had Parkinson's, and so it's the condition that makes you shake a lot. And so apparently, this program called Rock Steady Boxing has done research to find that, hey, boxing is good for Parkinson's. And so it was just this cute boxing class. I had to go out there the first time I went out there one day. It was in Key Biscayne, so it was 40 minutes from Miami's campus. Drove out there, and I had been on the phone with the PR lady, and she said, yeah, you can come out. I can't guarantee you that you'll be able to go and cover this. You're going to have to ask the head of the class. So I go over there, I ask the teacher, and he's like, okay, cool, stand here. And then everyone comes in, and he's like, hello, I have this guy from the TV station here who would like to film the class. You guys tell me, do you want him to be able to do it or not? And then this lady comes up to me in Spanish and tells me, basically, I'm not going to do it.
Wow.
And so I have to start, mind you, I don't speak Spanish.
Yeah.
And so I'm taking Spanish class, so I know enough that she's saying no.
Yeah.
And then she's up. But it was really just the fact that she wanted me to at least try to say it in Spanish. Once I did, she was like, oh, no, I'm just messing with you, fully in English. And so, but that was just the spirit of the class. And I was like, that is just so cool being able to, and because I went 2 days. I went back a second day because they were so tired that first day that I went that they ended up not boxing after doing their weightlifting, which, mind you, was 2-pound dumbbells. They're doing rows, and I'm like, this is so just funny. And so I just love that story, and I think that it was kind of the one wholesome thing that I had on that reel.
That's awesome.
When it comes to storytelling stuff like that, this is just something that I'm curious about. A bunch of us are reporters here. When you're trying to find that balance for a story that you want to cover, how do you strike that balance between something that is personally interesting and a story that you think deserves to be told and needs to be told, both in a respectful and wide-reaching way?
I think that every story you cover should be interesting. If you're not interested in it, point blank, then you should find a different story to go and pitch. That's the way that I go about it. Now, mind you, there's going to be situations in the real world. I don't know if you guys at WICB like experiment with like sponsored content or in any way, right? That's something I experienced at Front Office Sports for the first time. Is okay. There are times when, hey, you'll have sponsored obligations, but that doesn't mean that you can't find an interesting angle that you think is fun and exciting. So I think that every story you tell should be fun and exciting, and just you find a way, even if it's, hey, you were just assigned to go to this game, find the most unique way to go and talk about this game. I took a sports reporting class with Michelle Kaufman. She's she's one of the big sports reporters in Miami, works for the Miami Herald. She took us to a Miami Marlins game. She knows I hate baseball. It's not a secret. Professor
Really?
Kaufman knows I hate baseball. She had to buy me Baseball for Dummies before my internship at
Huge.
ESPN because they told me I needed to learn more about baseball. And so, but she took us to this Marlins game and I was like, okay, cool. This is a doozy. No one's scoring. It wasn't even like it was a pitching masterclass or anything like that. But the one guy who hit a home run, it was either his or the coach's birthday. It was the coach's birthday, and the guy that hit the home run was from, 40 minutes away. And so I was like, you know what? That's like my angle on the story. And so even if there's something that you're supposed to cover, assigned to cover, just find an interesting angle about it, is my kind of mindset about it.
And us as college students, we've done some crazy stories. I've hopped on a rowing boat in the middle of one of the Finger Lakes.
I've flipped a rowing boat before.
Okay, really?
Did you?
No, I didn't get to. I was on with the coach, so he did all
Okay.
the rowing. Thankfully, I think I probably would have flipped myself. But I know that you did a segment for the TV station in Miami where you would, do different sports with different athletes.
Yes.
Is there a sport that really stuck out to you that was like, wow, this is so interesting, and it's like an under the radar sport? I know you did. I believe it was sailing, a couple other ones.
Yeah, sailing. I flipped a sailing boat, not
Okay.
a rowboat. Yeah, I think that.
Is that
flipping
harder? I feel like that might be harder and more impressive that you did that.
harder to flip it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
probably.
It's a mass
No.
object.
No, I think that my favorite. Gosh, what was my favorite sport? Okay, my senior capstone. I convinced them to let me do a half-hour version of that segment. So
How
I
long
got
was
to.
it supposed to be?
So it was basically, hey, give us an idea for whatever your capstone would be. It can be a 100-page paper, or it can be 30 minutes of, video content. And I
Okay.
said, okay, I have this pre-existing series that I like. I want to experiment with it more, test out being able to film myself more. And so I ended up convincing them to let me do 3 sports, but 2 really stuck with me as favorites. So I did wakeboarding, and then I did swimming.
Okay.
The twist about the swimming one, though, was that I joined the club swim team. Straight up just joined the team for a month. And on the first day of practice, I told them that I didn't know how to swim. I informed them. It wasn't me lying and just saying, haha, no, I informed them. And he was like, oh, okay, let's get in this lane where you can stand if you need to. And then for 3 weeks, I started learning how to swim. But why wakeboarding was so fun is just the fact that I did wakeboarding before I did the swimming, which was probably a bit of a mistake.
Yeah. Was this all before the sailing thing? Or did you flip a sailing boat while not being able to swim?
That too.
Oh my
Life
god.
jackets. You know
sailing-
what? Life jackets.
Sailing was actually, what was it? That was probably the 3rd one we ever did. I did cheer before that.
Okay.
And I did women's lacrosse before that.
You are bold.
Yeah. I'm just bad at a lot of
But
sports.
that's sport. But I feel like that's the
It makes it
perfect,
better.
the epitome of being a sports broadcaster in college. We
Yeah.
get thrown opportunities left, right, and center. It's just all about taking that opportunity. And I want to, talk about your Nance reel because it was exceptional.
Thank you.
I know you, you really focus on putting the right stories in there. You compiled it, great short form content. How long did that take you could compile? Were you overthinking? You kind of went with the flow when you were writing the project.
I'm going to be honest. It probably took me under 2 hours to put that one together.
Okay.
Because this was my senior year. I had my junior year reel.
Mhm.
And if I'm being honest, I thought that they were so similar that in terms of I had 2 big stories in there that were the same, I think they were 3 to 5 minute pieces that were in there from the year before. And I was like, I feel like this is going to be too much repeat content.
Yeah.
But they were pieces that, hey, I'd spent 8 months on. So I wasn't not going to put them in there because I had been focusing actually that semester on working. I was doing an internship with ESPN's YouTube team rather than continuing with student media. And so
Good choice.
I mean, it ended up working out.
Yeah.
It led to my job now. But so it only took me 2 hours because I knew, okay, I had 8 minutes set in stone. I was like, okay, what's one more news story I can do? Cool, let's throw in this one with the Parkinson's boxing team because that was just fun. And then it was just figuring out, okay, what stand-ups am I going to put in there? And I just wanted to put in a million of them. And so I put in just short pieces of each one. And then I put in the series that I had developed for ESPN's YouTube. So I compiled those things, and I was like, okay, that I know exactly what's going to go in there. And I did it. I think figuring out the export, because I got an export error, took longer than actually putting the reel together.
I all too familiar with that. I used to have a laptop that refused to cooperate with Premiere. I want to stick with story selection, but I want to come back to the bigger event that is Radio Row. Your first time here, our first time here. Is there a story that you are particularly hunting while you're here? Like, obviously, you're here with Front Office Sports. I'm sure you have your assignments, but I'm sure you also probably have some passion projects here that if you can find someone, is there a story that you want to find?
I don't know. See, I've gone in so I know this is going to be overwhelming. I know I have a bunch of assignments that we would love to be able to get to. So it's just been kind of more so focusing on that. As I've walked around, I've seen some other things. I told you guys about the Children's Hospital robots that are kind of roaming around. That has become now my little mini passion project that I want to do a video about, which we weren't assigned to, But yeah, though just mainly the assignments that I came in to do and making sure that I do a good job because this is my first time at a Super Bowl. It's overwhelming. I feel like there's a lot of stuff going on.
And let's talk about the big game for a bit, because we are here at Radio Row. I know you're from Chicago. That doesn't really give you with a team not to root for. Who are you pulling for in the bowl?
Honestly, I feel like this is the first one in a long time that I haven't had hey, this team must win for the sake of my fandom. I do like the Chiefs. I do love Mahomes.
Me too.
I feel
Great
like
choice.
that. I feel like the Chiefs. I feel like the Chiefs' fatigue is overstated. I still think that they're still a great team, and we should root for that. But I also, the only thing about the Eagles that I wouldn't be mad if they won is just the way Saquon has come back after basically being dissed by the Giants. Hey, we're not going to pay you. Go find someone who will give you the money.
I'm a Giants
This
fan.
is a Giants fan right here. I'm a Ravens fan, so this is a double hate watch for me.
Yeah.
So are you a Bears fan, or are you just because you grew up in Chicago? Okay.
Yeah, unfortunately,
Bears.
I'm a Bears fan, which I was.
Hey, Ben Johnson's a great hire, though.
Ben Johnson is a great hire. I'm glad that Jaden Daniels is not here in the Super Bowl, just for the sake of we as Chicago fans would never hear the end of it. If he was a rookie quarterback that we could have had, and he took his team to the Super Bowl as a rookie, yeah, that just would have been
I still pick
disaster.
Caleb every time, and I know people look at me like I'm two heads after the year that Jaden Daniels had, but do you feel like the Caleb pick will settle and everyone's just over hating right now?
I personally think that the season just fell apart after the Jaden Daniels Hail Mary, and
I forgot about that game.
and
You did?
after that, everything.
I remember it now, but
I mean, they went on a big losing streak after that.
It was 10 in a row, right?
Yeah, it was 10 in a row. Then they beat the Packers, though. That's what matters. But, yeah, I think that was the thing that really crushed his confidence and then crushed all sorts of team continuity. Because then you had one game where Thomas is calling the plays, and then all of a sudden he gets promoted to the head coach. And then it's like, okay, well, now all sorts of continuity gone.
I've got one last thing for you before I let Justin wrap it up. I just want to ask, is there a dream job? Obviously, I'm sure you're happy at Front Office Sports. It's your first gig after winning Nance. I'm sure it's lovely. But would you want to return to Chicago and do something there? Would you want to find yourself in New York or LA? Is there a pinnacle you're trying to climb to?
I mean, I guess a little bit of breaking news. I am moving to New York soon.
Oh, welcome.
We are planning on moving out to Manhattan so I can be at the FOS headquarters.
Can we do a Woj bomb on that on our radio now?
yeah. I'll let you know the exact date as soon as I find a roommate. No, but so that's in the works. So we're looking at moving out to New York. But I think my dream job, I always told people in college, I was like, hey, and my professors hate when I say this, by the way. I was like, hey, I do not watch local news. So I just consume a lot of my stuff on social media.
Yeah.
Which, hey, all your professors hate that because it's like, okay, these are not credible sources telling the information. But what if there was?
Wrong.
What if there was those credible sources on there? What if there is just a bunch of journalists utilizing these platforms in order to go and spread this information. So my dream has always been, I know that, TV consumption habits are changing. I know that digital is on the rise. I know that social is on the rise. So I want to be at the forefront of whatever that intersection is. And I feel like here at Front Office Sports, that's been great because I've been able to go in and they've invested in producing high quality content for social media, original reporting for social media. And then I'd love to just, if there's one other thing I'd like to do, I'd love to integrate, TV into that. I'd still love to continue doing this, but also integrate TV, YouTube, things like that into it. That would be kind of the dream.
And you
Love
mentioned,
Sorry, no, I was just saying, love it.
you mentioned like all the stuff you do from Front Office Sports. I have 2 questions about the NBA and All-Star Weekend, but I want to hit on that Front Office Sports real quick.
Yeah.
You got a favorite project you've done so far, or something in the works that you've really, really passionate about? It seems like something really cool about your job is you're always able to do what you want to do, and I think that's something really cool. So is there a a big name project you've been working on, or something you worked on that you really have enjoyed so far with Front Office Sports?
Coming to big events is what I've realized is like the thing that like hits a lot on the numbers. We had an event called Tuned In back in, I think it was October, where we had some of the biggest names in sports media out there. So we had Stephen A. Smith there, we had Mark Lazarus there, Burke Magnus, some of the big like business guys in the sports media scape. So that was like super sick, but I think that the different series that we've been doing, that we've developed as a social team, have been really fun to do. I mean, Stadium Status is probably the coolest one because for all of them now we've turned it into something where, hey, we're going to go here in person every time. And so I just love that, and I love that the one that hit and started it being big for us was the Northwestern, Lakeside Stadium, and the fact that all I did was drive 40
Amazing
minutes.
stadium, by the way.
It was a surprisingly
so cool.
fun venue.
You've been to you go to the Rocks too up there? I know they have like
yeah.
the Rocks right by the water as
Yeah.
well outside the stadium.
Yeah. So it was that's probably my favorite, Stadium Status.
All right, 2 quick questions. One, reaction to the Luka Doncic trade.
Oh my gosh, I was at a party when I found out,
Okay.
and my jaw dropped. I sat down and started working at the party.
Yeah.
I broke the news to the rest of the Front Office Sports team.
Oh, that's
Huge.
awesome. Let's call you
and-
Woj.
Yeah, and it was just brutal. I feel for all Mavs fans and all Luka fans.
Yeah, I couldn't believe it. We were
I mean,
like,
maybe Luka fans are maybe just Luka fans are happy. If you're like a player watcher, I guess some people just hate anyone going to the Lakers though, so that's fair.
and then
Yeah.
you had the opportunity to work with TNT and the NBA TV for All-Star Weekend. First of all, congratulations on that. But
Thank you.
what's a favorite moment from All-Star Weekend before we wrap this up?
Isaiah Thomas from the Detroit Pistons, right? The OG Isaiah Thomas came
I
up
met the
to me.
criteria.
Hey, he came up to me, introduced himself to me. He said, "Hi, I'm Isaiah," and I'm like,
Dang.
"Yes,
Wow.
I know." And and so Jamal Crawford also like came up to me. He was like, "Hey, I'm Jamal," and I was like, "You're one of my favorite players of all time. Of course, I know who you are." But Isaiah Thomas came up to me, and we were talking. He said, "Hey, where are you from?" I said, "Chicago suburbs." I know you're a Chicago guy. He said, "Which suburb?" I said, "Elgin." And I'm like, this dude is not knowing where Elgin is. We're 30 miles outside the city. And he then came up to me at the end of the night. He said, "I know exactly where Elgin is." Yeah. Talked to me about like schools out there. And then he came up to me at the end of the night. I had done my first hit. I'd interviewed Scoot Henderson like during the Rising Star game. It re-aired on NBA TV. Isaiah was hosting, and then he said, Daryl, did you hear it? Did you hear it? And I was like, "What?" He said, "I shouted out Elgin when I tossed to you." I was like,
That's awesome.
that was
Oh,
the
that
coolest
would,
thing.
I think I would perish. I did
I
not think
would-
I would walk out.
I was like, this is the coolest day of my life. I like
awesome.
Isaiah Thomas shouting out Elgin, Illinois, my hometown, which is known for watches, not not anything else. And our watch factory closed in, the 40s or 60s? Yeah, so that was probably the coolest experience from that.
Yeah, Daryl Barnes, Front Office Sports. Thanks so much for joining us.
Hey, thank you guys so much.
Justin Antonucci, Parker Hollendon, joined by Evan Cohen, host of On Sports and Like with Chris Candy and Michelle Smallman. Evan, thanks so much for hopping on the show. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you guys for having me. I appreciate you all being here, which is amazing.
Yeah, it's been an awesome radio road. Last day is Friday, but we're a student radio station. You participated in student radio in UW-Madison. Kind of tell us about your start in radio and how you kind of acclimated up all the way until today.
The irony is my student radio station, WSUM in Madison, Wisconsin, same 91.7.
Oh, no
Really,
way.
Exact same thing. Yeah, 91.7 in Madison, Wisconsin. And student radio is awesome. And it's so undervalued on so many levels because basically what you guys, and kudos to all of you, let me just say this. What you guys are doing here is awesome because you're showing so much effort and tenacity to actually be here, which is so much of the battle, the willingness to work. And when we were doing student radio, so I graduated college in 2002. So I was there from 98 to 02. At that time, streaming was not a thing, right? Nobody was streaming radio or content in any way, shape, or form. There was no digital content. And our radio station was 91.7 my senior year. We were not on the radio for the first 3 years.
my God.
We were just streaming. Now, nobody knew what streaming was, to a point that one of my best friends literally said to me, I don't understand. Are you guys typing your shows? I said, no, we're broadcasting our shows, but you have to get it on the internet. And there would be days where we would be there and we could see the numbers of people listening. And I'm not kidding you when I tell you this. One person listening. The one person was not a person. It was the computer we had on at the station. So we would spend 6 hours prepping for everything with nobody listening.
I love that because we have a similar program set up. It's called VIC Radio. We have a streaming radio station, and it's where all our sports talk shows go. So it is the same kind of thing where we're getting all our reps, but we know that at the end of the day, it's probably maximum of 10 listeners at a time.
The parents and grandparents like to check in.
But you ended up staying with college radio. You worked
Yeah.
with FSU, you worked with Miami and the Hurricanes, doing play-by-play, sideline reporting. Just talk about the college sport landscape that you like came into your powers in. I don't want to say grew up in.
No,
You obviously
I
already
think
are
that's, yeah.
professional.
So I covered Wisconsin football and basketball as an intern and for the student radio station the 4 years I was there. I moved to South Florida. We started a radio station, ESPN 760 at the time. It's now 106.3 in West Palm Beach, Florida. That was the largest market in the country without an all-sports radio station dedicated to the market. So growing up in New York, as you guys know, there are 2 stations, right? The one that I'm three stations. The one that I'm heavily involved in, which is 1050 and 880 on the ESPN New York side, and WFAN in New York. And so those stations cover the tri-state area. In South Florida, there were stations in Miami, stations in Orlando. But there's this massive market in between the two that's a top 50 market in America that did not have an all-sports radio station dedicated to the market. So the company I work for, Good Karma Brands, in addition to ESPN, saw that hole, filled that hole. I got the opportunity there, hosting nights, doing sales, doing everything. And then I did sidelines and play-by-play for FAU, Florida Atlantic University, and then ended up doing the post-game shows for the University of Miami and for football. And the landscape I was dealing with them then is a lot different than it is now because there was no NIL. And coming from Wisconsin, I thought, now I'm going to cover Miami. It's going to be a dominant team, a dominant university program. Completely the opposite.
Quickly, I just got curious. You had bounced between professionally and collegiately a bunch of different colleges. If you had to name like a college team that you actively support, is it still Wisconsin?
It's Wisconsin, but I'm such a big Bill Belichick fan that I'm now going to root for UNC football. I swear to God.
Why Belichick?
So what I love more than anything, and people accuse me, and it's fair, of being a front-running fan, I love leadership and management. So I'm very weird. I root for Pat Riley. I root for Bill Belichick. I root for Mike Tomlin. I root for the best leaders and coaches.
Marcus Freeman?
Marcus
Sorry,
Freeman.
I'm a Notre Dame guy. I had to ask.
Marcus Freeman. We've had him on. He's had a hell of a start to his career at Notre Dame. There's no question about that. So I end up rooting for those programs. So when I moved to South Florida, it was before Wade and before Bosch, before James, before Shaq, everything. I started rooting for the Heat because the Heat were great to us, and I love the Patriots because of Belichick and Brady.
And then I have to ask, you're in Florida as your start. How'd you end up making your way up to New York, eventually getting involved with Chris Canty and, starting on Sports and Like?
So in 2011, I got an offer from SiriusXM to be the morning show host on Mad Dog Sports Radio. And they had heard, through connections, they heard me in South Florida. They wanted me to do the morning show. I had no interest in leaving the job in South Florida. So I literally said to them, can I do both? And they said yes, which nobody's ever gotten that opportunity. I got so lucky. So for 12 years, I was hosting simultaneously Morning Drive on SiriusXM and Afternoon Drive on ESPN West Palm.
Wow.
So I did that for 12 years, at least 2 shows a day. Then I started doing NBA radio shows, and I did 3 shows a day. So that's the advice for you guys, right? If somebody makes you an offer, if it's good for you, say yes if it's good for you, but don't say no to the previous one until they make you say no. I know that sounds ridiculous, and you don't want to do it in a I'll only do it if, but I got multiple offers at the same time. I was really lucky, so why not do all of it? So I do that show for 12 years, ESPN is going through some changes on the radio lineup. The head person at ESPN Radio had been a listener of ours on Sirius XM for those 12 years, and I got approached to start this new show with Michelle and with Chris, and we're now a year and a half in, and I think we've been improving every day.
Who came up with the name quickly?
Canty.
Ah, great.
So
Canty did.
between, we had this written down as a question anyway that we wanted to ask because you host a morning drive show. You start at 6 a.m. every day. But now knowing that you did that for so long, how bad is your sleep schedule between research and then doing radio early in the morning?
I'm so used to it that I don't, it's funny because a lot of people ask that question, and I'm so used to doing this. This is year 14 in a row, I think, for me, of doing this schedule. So it's not that my sleep is bad. It's just it's altered based on what's going on. So if there's Monday Night Football, I'm going to sleep less on Mondays than I would on Tuesdays. If there's Thursday Night Football, I'm going to sleep less on Thursdays than I will on Wednesdays, right? It all depends on what's on the night before. And I don't look at it as like, oh, wow, like we wake up so early in the morning. No, I signed up for this. This is the greatest opportunity anyone could get. Every single one of you, I'm going to assume, would trade with me right now.
Yeah.
But I'm going to tell you something. There's lots of parts of what you're doing that I would trade with you. I don't have the ability to screw up. I have to be as close to perfect as possible because of the fact of the platform we're on. But I can get a whole lot better. And the fact that you guys every day have the opportunity to screw up, don't lose sight of how awesome being at Ithaca and being on student radio actually is for you.
Well, that I definitely agree. You can screw up as much as you want while you're here. We've got a couple more minutes left with you, so hey, feel free to mess up as much as you want. As someone else who does 2 hours of morning radio on Sunday mornings, I do just want to ask, like, what do you enjoy about that early morning radio, being part of people's morning drive to work?
We're first.
Yeah?
We're first. And I don't mean we're best. I'm not saying that. I'm saying whatever is going to happen the rest of the day, we have a chance to impact that. So there's stories from the night before. Let's just use today, right? So Eli Manning doesn't get into the Hall of Fame last night. Yeah.
Robbed.
But what we say
Good
this
job,
morning,
brothers.
that audio can now be used the rest of the day. That video can now be used the rest of the day. So we have a chance to kind of set the tone for what's going on during the course of the day. But it's our job to be good enough to actually do that for the rest of our shows on ESPN Radio and ESPN2, et cetera.
You think Eli's the first ballot Hall of Famer?
Of course. Well, he's not, obviously.
Do you think he deserves to be?
Yes,
Sorry.
absolutely. But here's the catch on that. If you isolate it, if you just judge Eli Manning by his regular seasons, he's not a Hall of Famer.
Mm-hmm.
If you just judge him by 2 Super Bowl wins with no context, not a Hall of Famer. He beat the Patriots twice. Beat Belichick and Brady twice. He beat an undefeated team once. He has the most significant upset, arguably, in the history of the sport. And I don't believe in the pre-Mahomes, from when Brady stepped into the league to when Mahomes stepped into the league, that era of football. I think there's an argument that Eli Manning is the third most significant player during that time behind Tom Brady and Peyton Manning.
That's awesome to hear. I have to ask, you
Not the third best.
No, yes,
The
significant.
like, how do you tell the story of that era without telling the story of Eli?
I've been
upsetting
going at it on Twitter, like, oh, like he's a winner, and one of my friends keeps saying, make an argument without the Super Bowl. I go, you can't say that. That quite literally is the base of the argument. So I think that's a crazy take. You guys get callers all the time. Can you share a funny caller story, either one from a while ago, anyone recently? I always love looking up the hilarious call highlights.
Okay, so you guys are really young, but there was a player in the 80s and 90s by the name of Ickey Woods. Have you ever heard of Ickey Woods?
The name rings
Why
a
did
bell.
it
Who do you
really
play
does
for?
ring
Who
a
do you play
bell?
Okay,
for?
he was a running back for the Cincinnati Bengals,
That's
and he
why.
had the Ickey Shuffle, and he had a dance.
Yes,
okay?
yes.
He had a dance. A caller called up and said he's the Polish Ickey Woods, which was like, I don't understand this for the life of me. The Polish Ickey Woods. This is recently. And I'm like, what a weird thing that's like his, and he was a funny caller. All right, month later, 2 months later, all of a sudden our producer, Nuno, says to us in our ear, or during a break, he says, Polish Ickey Woods reached out. And we're like, what? Because he made a song about the show. I said, what? And then, so this guy did a whole parody song about the show as the Polish Ickey Woods, a running back from the late 80s, early 90s, that's not a Hall of Famer. This is just the most recent one that has happened. So
The idea of being that in love, I love that. It's the tweet that goes around once every year that there's nothing stronger than the connection between a boy and the irrelevant football player that he loves. I love that. What kind of attachment, like?
well, not only a boy, girl, anybody.
Oh,
anybody.
well, absolutely. Like, it's just the tweet that goes around,
Yeah.
100%. That everyone has that one athlete that they grew up watching, that they absolutely adore and will always be obsessed
Mine's
with,
Eli.
no matter how irrelevant they were. Yours
Well,
is
Eli's pretty relevant though.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah. See, I'm Ravens fan. I've just got a bunch of the big names, whatever. Mine are Hall of Famers, except they're not this time around. It's fine. Sorry. Back to you. We want to come back over to you, Evan. I want to talk about the length of your show. How much do you think you have to recycle versus how have you gotten so good at being able to stretch stuff into longer periods of time, especially on dry days like we're coming up on, because we're about to be post NFL and in the NBA All-Star break?
Yeah, so I would say that there's no such thing as a dry day. Dry days, by your definition, are my favorite days. I would rather do a show with no games than the Super Bowl the next day or the Super Bowl the day before. My favorite shows are the middle of July when nothing's going on, because that's when you test yourself. That's when you got to be great at radio. So here's the thing. Our medium, in terms of 4 hours, nothing is ever recycled because your job as a host is to always approach it as the first time you're talking about it, because it's always the first time somebody's listening to it. So you've got to do everything again for the first time. So even if I've done this topic 20 times during the course of the show, and Chris and Michelle and I have talked about it, it's the first time that audience in that moment is hearing it. So we always have to approach it like the first time. So it's not 4 hours as much as it is, like I was taught an exercise that's amazing here. I'll do it with you guys on the air. How long is your show?
We each do an hour at school.
Okay. No, it's not. How long is your show?
With commercial breaks, like 45 minutes?
No, it's not. Your show is however long I listen to it for.
Dang.
That's a good one.
Because think about how you guys would listen to the radio. So Mike and the Mad Dog, when I'm growing up, that's a show I listened to. It's on 1 to 6:30. Did I listen to all 5.5 hours? Howard Stern was on from 6 in the morning to whenever he stopped. My favorite show of all time, along with Mike and the Mad Dog.
Great movie, too.
Yeah, Private Part's amazing. Did I listen to the whole show? No. But how do I say something's my favorite of something if I don't consume all of it? Because I do consume all of it. I consume all that I'm able to consume in that moment, and your show is as long as I listen to it, not as long as you're doing it. Which is why there's no such thing as repeating, because you're doing everything for the first time. And if someone says you're repeating, you should say thank you, because that means they've listened long enough to hear you say it twice.
That's excellent. We are at Radio Row. I want to ask you a couple questions about the big game.
Of course.
Is there a storyline that you guys have really been talking about a lot on your radio show? Something you like that's really caught your attention? Not like obviously the Saquon Barkley stuff is crazy, the ref stuff, but I want to know, what do you guys think is that biggest storyline heading into Super Bowl Sunday?
Well, we've been talking a ton about Mahomes and Reed, and if they win, if they surpass the Pats, obviously that's a big one, and comparing Brady to Mahomes and Reed and Belichick. I also, while I'm picking the Chiefs to win, I think the slander on Jalen Hurts has gone too far. I think he's an excellent quarterback. I think we go to this place of, what if he has to win the game for them? Well, what if they're good enough where he doesn't? Because I don't think the quarterback's job with that team is to win the game for them. I think it's to prevent the other team from winning. Jalen Hurts has not thrown an interception since November 10th. Think about that. He does not have many turnovers this entire season. The biggest knock on Jalen Hurts, everybody always says, is, well, he takes the sack to take them out of field goal range, and maybe he can't throw the ball downfield. Okay, well, if I don't give the other team the ball, and I don't give Mahomes the ball, and I don't let Mahomes on a short field, Jalen Hurts is way better than we give him credit for. That's the sneaky storyline for me. Even though I'm picking the Chiefs, I just think we've gone too far with the anti-Jalen Hurts
You're
stuff.
the first person that said that all week, so that's definitely a sneaky storyline.
Yeah, I love that, and I want to follow through on that Jalen Hurts thread, because there's been a lot of buzz in the last week, specifically since the NFC Championship game, that once again there are owners who are going to be pushing for the tush push to get banned. Do you have any thoughts on that in terms of, is it patently unfair? Is it something that no one else can replicate?
No, I think it's crazy. Like, because a play works. By the way, it doesn't always work for everyone. And so some owners of teams and people on the competition committee should not want to ban it, especially if you don't play the Eagles. Because think about how many teams did not do it well. So if you're not doing it well, it actually is easier to stop. But, like, no, I think that's okay. So then ban the pass.
Yeah.
Because it works too much. Like, what are we doing? I hate that we're doing that.
I got two quick questions before we let you go. You said you were a Belichick guy. If Mahomes won his third Super Bowl, where does this leave the GOAT debate moving forward?
It's still Brady. Gerald Moose Johnson, who played for the Cowboys, legendary player, now broadcaster with Fox. I'm sitting at our set the other day. We had him on a few weeks ago. He comes up to me to talk about the interview we did, which was unbelievably flattering and nice of him to do. So he comes up, starts talking to me, and I asked him that question about Brady versus Mahomes and Belichick and whatever. And he said, how many people do you know that could run a really fast sprint? I said, well, a lot of people can run a really fast sprint. He goes, of those people, how many people of those people can run a marathon? I said, well, basically nobody. And here the thing he said was,
that's a good one.
Wow. He said that the Chiefs are the fastest sprint maybe of all time, but that doesn't mean they can run the marathon. And that's why I still will go Pats in that spot.
And then Super Bowl prediction. I know you said you're taking the Chiefs. Can we
Chiefs.
get a score? We've been trying to get.
What was our score, Rob, that we picked today? I think we said 26-22 is what we said.
Oh, that's
Love
an
it.
obscure
Okay.
one. I like
Yeah.
it.
Yeah,
I
the
don't-
low scoring hasn't been big. A lot of people are like, to
We-
speak in betting terms, taking
Yeah.
the over. This
We
time
haven't
around.
gotten anything under the 20s. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you guys for having me.
It's been an honor. Evan Cohen of Unsportsmanlike. Justin Antonucci and Parker Hollandoner are joined by Brian Curtis, the editor-at-large at The Ringer and the host of the Press Box. Brian, thanks for coming on the show. How's New Orleans so far?
Yeah, it's good. This looks like Radio Row because there's a bunch of guys that look like us looking in various stages of desperation on a Monday. And
Yeah.
we've got some Monday guests walking around looking for interviews, so it's very, very normal.
I'm glad you mentioned Radio Row because I want to start off with the exact quote in your email response to me. And I quote, "I'm so glad to be able to experience the beauty and horror of Radio Row in person." Elaborate on that, especially the horror.
Well, there's a certain sweatiness to Radio Row. And I don't just mean the stink of, our friends in the sports radio industry, though that is perhaps also the case. There's just a lot of commerce going on. Like, there's Ryan Leaf right over there, right? Former number 2
We
pick in the
had him
spoke
on
to him
earlier.
earlier
You had him
today.
on.
Yeah.
Okay, so Ryan Leaf is what we call a Monday guy. Radio Row guests are ranked by day. So a Monday guy is a certain level of fame, a Tuesday guy a little more famous, and on until Thursday when you have the most famous people, then there's usually a little mini drop-off on Friday. But the people are here because they want to do as many interviews as humanly possible to plug themselves or a product. And that's what I mean by the horror. I mean, you're just watching commerce happen in front of you. And also some journalism, but that's
Yeah.
kind of a
So
secondary
it's
thing.
promotional one, journalism two. Ryan
Yes.
Leaf actually said he had like 31 interviews scheduled today, so I'm glad you mentioned that.
The
but
Iron Man of Radio Row.
He was making the rounds. He went from doing his radio show over on the XM booth that's right behind where we're sitting, and came right over and started talking with all the college radio stations, and now he's just making the full round. It's very impressive,
What a
frankly.
pro.
Yeah. I just want to go back to Radio Row. Any specific moments from Radio Row? What made you fall in love with this event? Your article was great on it, and it's just my first time here. So share the love. What's so great about this place?
Well, you're very nice to say that, first of all. One is that as somebody who covers the media, all my media friends are here. This is my Super Bowl.
Yeah.
The thing with Patrick Mahomes is kind of secondary for my considerations. But one thing I love about it is there are not too many places in America where you just rank people. Where you just say, okay, you're more important, you're a little less important, oh, you're even more important. And Radio Row's one of those places. Like, you are a Thursday guy, or you're a Wednesday guy, or you're a Tuesday guy, and you really can't move. If some of these people we see here today tried to come back on Thursday, nobody would talk to them because they'd be booked up with better guests. So there's just something very funny and, just kind of bracing about that kind of ranking of celebrity. We don't get that much in this life.
And you host the Press Box, which I think is great. You cover a variety of things, whether it's politics, sports. One of my favorites was the one you did with Bob Costas. So I'll ask you, before we get into talking about some sports, favorite guest you've had on your podcast and why?
Oh, my God. Costas was up there talking about the NBA on NBC glory years. That was really fun. I've had Ian Eagle on. It's always a fantastic interview. I had John Krakauer, who wrote Into the Wild, on, and that was just one of my favorites because he doesn't do too many interviews. So to get him on to talk about a great book like that was right up there for me.
And then you mentioned the NBA, just point blank. Luka Doncic trade, you get that notification on your phone. What's the reaction? I guess it was LA time, so you were wide awake.
Yeah, I was. And I was sitting in bed, and I had the same reaction I think everybody else did. Was one, this is one of those fake accounts. It's like one letter
Yeah.
off. And then the second one is that Shams Charania of ESPN, who broke the news, has been hacked. That was, I think that everybody went through that 1-2 step. And once you got through that, it was just jaw on the floor. Because we don't see trades like that very much anymore.
Yeah.
I also thought of my friends over here. I'm from Dallas, Fort Worth
Yeah,
originally.
you Texas, right?
Texas guy. So, and we're sitting next to Dallas Sports Radio. I was like, Monday is going to be the greatest day in the history of Dallas Sports Radio. Because it's so easy.
Yeah.
There's one lane. Like, nobody's like, well, I actually think AD is no. It is one take. You drive it all day long, and, you win.
Yeah.
Where do you settle right now on the move? Obviously, it's only been 2 days. What do you think? Because it's obviously there are some controversial takes on every side of it.
I think the weirdest thing is NBA people, we're used to, if you trade away the super duper star, you are building for the future. You're getting 20 draft picks, you're getting young players. That didn't happen here. Mavericks got a player who was older and more injured than Luka Doncic. They got back one number one pick, as everyone's pointed out. So I think that kind of breaks our brains as media members.
Yeah.
Because it's not the way we're used to thinking about these things.
I think what breaks it even more is the GM going out of his way to say, like, I have to make tough decisions, but I stand by this, and we're building to win now. Which, listen, I don't see how you could trade Luka Doncic and somehow be in more win now than you were.
They went to the finals last year.
Yeah, when we got the trade news, like we had to be at the airport 3:15 in the morning. It's 12:30. I'm still awake, and I'm like about to go to sleep. Boom, Shams bomb, and I'm like, there we go.
And we're all going to bed last night, and the De'Aaron Fox thing drops, which is just another thing. But segueing, because, trade deadline for the NBA coming up. Trade news in the NFL today. Obviously, a move isn't made, but Myles Garrett requests the trade formally. What is your thoughts on that? Because obviously, you're gonna have to cover that one a lot.
So Myles Garrett apparently is a Wednesday guy, just so he will
Really?
be here.
Okay.
So that's kind of
Whoa.
a weird Radio Row moment, is it not?
Yeah.
Oh,
You
he's gonna get
request
lit
the
up with
trade, and then you're going to go around here like talking to everybody
Mm-hmm.
about it. I mean, that's the first question that everybody's going to ask, right? Also, it's weird because we just had a news cycle. I feel with the Browns saying we're not going to trade Myles
Exactly. It
Garrett.
was like 2 days ago.
Now we're doing the Myles Garrett. It's just a very funny one to me because he's one of those guys that just, to me, feels like the guy who's like a Hall of Famer who plays on a team that never really wins
Yeah.
anything.
Yeah.
And he's there his whole career, and he's awesome. But apparently he's not into being that guy.
I'm curious what the Browns are going to do in the draft, because I'm a huge Abdul Carter guy. Like, I think he should be the first overall pick. If he somehow falls to 3, I hope my Giants, hop on him. But do you think there's a chance that they still draft Carter, like, regardless of the Myles Garrett news? Like, a guy like Abdul Carter, could you see him going to Cleveland?
Yeah, it's like best player available,
Yeah.
even if our very best player is already one of the best defensive ends in the league. I mean, dude, watching that guy in the playoff with a bum shoulder
Yeah.
and the way he was still balling out, I would not be opposed to that at all.
I'm a Fighting Irish guy, so it was not fun to go up against Abdul Carter. But we're here. It's Super Bowl. It's Radio Row. You can't not talk about the game. I was going through some of your tweets, and you have a lot of interesting takes on the Chiefs. Is the hate overblown? Is it overproportional? What do you think about how the media covers the Chiefs today? Do you think they're almost picking at stories to try to get them painted as the villains, similar to like how Brady was in the Brady era?
I absolutely believe that. I don't think the Chiefs are villains. Just because, at least on the sports villain scale, like the Patriots with all the scandals, they had reached that level. They had absolutely, Bill Belichick being kind of a uniquely hateable coach, even if he's a brilliant coach. I don't think the Chiefs are villains. I think if we just did a poll of America and said, do you hate these guys? I don't think people would say yes. I think they're gotten mildly annoyed at their success. If they win one more Super Bowl, they're probably going to be like, okay,
Yeah.
give us a Josh Allen Super Bowl, give us something else. I don't see them that way. People don't hate Andy Reid. I don't think people like, somebody wrote an article for The Athletic where they were talking about Mahomes' villainy, and it was like talking about him posting a Kermit meme after the AFC Championship game. I'm like, that's the villainous part? Okay.
He had a funny reaction to the Luka Doncic trade as well.
He did. He's a huge Mavs fan.
Yeah.
Courtside all the time.
Really?
Texas guy. Yeah.
Okay, I knew it was Texas
That
guy.
makes sense.
Texas Tech, of course.
Looking from the perspective of us in the media, what do you think is better for the industry? The Chiefs three-peat or someone finally actually toppling them? Because it didn't seem like anyone really cared when the Bengals thing happened a couple years back.
What gives us the best takes? I think it's the multi-time champ falling is the better.
Really?
The better. Yeah. Just for variety.
Okay.
I remember one, if I can recall old Radio Rows, like the veteran Radio Row reporter that I am.
Please do.
When the
What-
Pats
what,
got,
sorry, what radio row is this for you?
well, it's like 5 or 6,
Okay.
I think.
Yeah.
They all run together. When the Pats played the Rams, so that was Brady's last Super Bowl win as a Patriot.
Yes.
Yes.
That one, people were just really tired. There was a lot. The villainy stuff had already also happened and then kind of gone away, and you just felt this exhaustion with the Patriots. And I think at some point that will probably hasn't clicked in with the Chiefs yet, but you will just feel that a little bit. So I think the Eagles winning one, and then Mahomes going, "Oh no, we got to come back next year."
It's
Nobody
true.
believed in us.
I would say though, I feel like is the more like controversial takes if Mahomes three-peats, like the Brady-Mahomes conversation, I feel like that's just like nationally blown out at another level.
And I got to give credit to Tony Romo because Tony Romo gets dinged a lot.
Mm-hmm.
If you watch that Bucks Chiefs Super Bowl, at the end of that game, he goes, you know what? If Mahomes was going to catch Brady, he kind of needed this one. Because it was actually, you went down 2 in the standings, right?
Yeah.
Brady got an extra one, and you didn't get one. So you're actually falling behind even farther. And that's one of those things that when he said that, people jumped on him. I was like, no. Patrick Mahomes absolutely thinks that.
Yeah.
And I do think you're right. So if you get 4 on the board, then Brady, that record, which did not seem touchable when Brady retired, suddenly seems pretty touchable.
On the other side of the bracket, the Eagles are having really quietly what is an amazing playoff run. Obviously, Saquon Barkley coming off of a historic season, arguably could have had the record. We don't need to get into that. That was a whole heck fire on the media side of all that. But in terms of the Eagles have been incredible this season. What is your outlook on win or lose? What do you think the takeaway from this season is for them?
So a couple of things. I mean, Saquon's a great story. I think that's the second best story of the
Killing
Super
me.
Bowl behind three-peat. Right, I'm sure as a Giants fan, that's
brutal.
That's pretty rough.
It is awful. But
And
yeah.
then
It's gonna
Nick
be okay, buddy.
Sirianni coming back from the dead is another great story. Because
The shaved head era.
I mean, he was like, he just profiled as a guy who was done. He was absolutely done, yelling at fans, all that stuff, and then they're in the Super Bowl again. He's made 2 Super Bowls. I mean, that's unbelievable. And if he were to win one, you know, I don't say that it'll be the Eagles coaches because we have seen win a Super Bowl, get fired a few years later.
Yeah.
It actually happened. But, you know, he would be in the pantheon for Philly sports.
I mean,
Absolutely.
and you've seen a lot of like coaches go down in flames, like hot ones, cold ones, like great hires, terrible hires. What is so different about this? Because Sirianni stands out, and the way that he's revitalized it, like it almost feels like a giant legacy move for him being able to come back from this. The shaved head Nick Sirianni, I feel like it's more than just a Twitter meme.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I mean, it's always funny with the Eagles because there's always, I think if you polled people in this room who says that Nick Sirianni's Eagles or Howie Roseman's Eagles,
Yeah.
probably the latter would win. Right? It's a great example of team building. They are so deep and so deep everywhere. Kobe Dean gets hurt, and they're kind of like,
hey,
we found
just
Zach
another-
Bond
just
on
another
the
Georgia
trash heap,
linebacker.
right? You know,
Yeah.
so we'll be fine. So I think there's a little bit of a, you know, the credit he will get is a very, very interesting question. Some, I think, is the answer. A lot, and certainly we will appreciate the Lazarus Act of Nick Sirianni, but will he, you know, be in the, you know, list of great coaches in the NFL? I'm not sure right away.
Just one more thing for
Yeah,
me.
no,
I'm so
all
sorry,
good.
Justin. But just while we're pulling the thread of this, how does it affect your perspective of everything? The fact that this isn't a quarterback-dominant playoff team, because it's something that we don't see a lot anymore. Where Jalen Hurts got banged up in the Rams game, and then he wasn't the game changer in the NFC Championship game. It was Saquon.
It's what scares me about their chances in the Super Bowl, because we've seen the last couple of Super Bowls come down to Brock Purdy has to make one play, and he couldn't make one more play, right? Play to fine game.
Yeah.
Niners almost won. Jalen Hurts, is he going to have to make one more play against a team that seems to win every single close game? And is he going to be able to make that throw? You know, can he? Sure, he can. But will he do that in the Super Bowl? I don't know. That's my non-expert football analysis would be like, that would scare me.
And I think that's kind of Parker's Ravens fan, but it's kind of like the similar perspective that I have on Lamar Jackson is like, until these quarterbacks can prove to us that they can make the hardest throws and the most clutch throws under 2 minutes, you have a chance to take the lead. I don't see how you can stray away with the Chiefs, but I want to go back to the coaching and Nick Sirianni. I feel like a lot of people are kind of sweeping under the rug how dominant the Eagles have actually been in this playoff. I mean, they blew out Washington, comfortably handled the Rams. Do you think that they're not getting enough credit because they're playing the Chiefs, or do you think that they're kind of, you know, getting rightfully so what they deserve?
Yeah, and the Rams game was kind of screwy because of the snow.
Yeah.
So weird.
So the final score might have looked a little,
Yeah.
looked a little weird. Maybe in normal conditions they win a little bit bigger. Yeah, I think so. I mean, and also I think the AFC Championship game was so good that it was kind of like we just memory hold the NFC Championship game right after just because of the sequence they were in. So maybe that the fact that they blew out the Commanders, a team that a lot of people said, man, the Commanders could be in the Super Bowl. I think you're right. They're probably not getting enough credit.
We'll get your prediction at the end of this, but I want to
Okay.
kind of shift to the landscape of sports media for a little bit. I feel like it's almost like you mentioned NBC with basketball. We're going to get that back next year. Do you believe we're in a golden age of sports broadcasters these days, or do you kind of just see it as just an ever-long thing of the evolution of sports broadcasting?
We're talking about the announcers, or we're talking about the industry?
Both. Let's start with the announcers.
So I think this is absolutely a golden age of announcing, particularly play-by-play. I mean, if you just look at the NFL this year, let's start there, and you're like, okay, I get a Joe Buck game, or I get a Mike Tirico game, or I get a Kevin Burkhardt game, or a Jim Nantz game. Like, where am I going? Like, man, I don't want to hear this. And that's not been the case in my lifetime. There have often been like booths that have been like number one booths where you've just been like, you know, and when Fox's number 2 booth is Joe Davis and Greg Olson.
Yeah.
That's unbelievable. And say the same thing about the NBA. You're going to have Mike Breen on ESPN. You're going to have Ian Eagle on Amazon. And you're going to have Tirico on NBC. Did I get those all right?
Yeah.
I mean, think about that. Kevin Harlan probably going to be number 2 in Amazon. You're just like, those are great
I
play-by-play
think the
guys.
crazy part is like beat Brian Anderson, number 3 in that crew too. Like it is.
I'm sorry to name so many Syracuse guys, by the way.
No,
I don't know if that's a
listen,
touchy subject
listen.
It's
around
okay.
here.
At the end of the
We'll get
day,
over
you
it.
have to appreciate greatness in this industry. It is
Yeah,
not just
even
about where
if
you go
they
to
went
school.
to Syracuse,
Right.
They can overcome.
And then on the
By the way, isn't it great to see something nice happen to somebody who went to Syracuse in broadcasting? Well, that never happens.
Yeah.
on
We
the
finally
other
caught
side,
a break.
On the other side of the booth, we're obviously seeing the advent of the former pro entering the color commentator booth. It's happening pretty much across sports. You're seeing a lot of it in baseball, a lot of it in basketball, and now it has become almost the norm in football that you have a former quarterback or a former great at something being in that color spot or in the third spot. What do you think about the way that that has changed, just the way that these broadcasts get planned and the way that even analysts are looked at now?
So what's changed, I think, is just the speed with which they go from the field to the booth.
Yeah.
Tony Romo really changed that because he was so good in 2017, his rookie year. Normally, you'd get a couple years of local TV, maybe a sports radio show. You'd get those reps. Chris Collinsworth got that, back in the
Collinsworth,
day,
yeah.
who's so good still. But now you just go straight in. Tom Brady had a gap year where he apparently studied broadcasting, but that is, I think, what's really interesting. And it puts a lot of pressure on those guys because, as you guys know, it's hard to be smart in a microphone and be good and make good points, but it's also hard to just master the machinery of it.
Mm-hmm.
And especially in a game where it's like, okay, here, KB's going to call the play. 1, 2, you're looking down, you're looking at your monitor, and now you got to be smart. And you got to do that 100 times a game.
Yeah.
That's hard. It's just hard to do that mechanically, much less to be brilliant when you're talking about the things that come out of your mouth.
It's always funny when I'm at school and I'll get put on like a color game for like a basketball, and in my head I'm like, yeah, like this is fun, but like
This is easy, right?
Yeah.
The play-by-play guy's got the tough
but
job.
at the end of the day, like, there are very few to, like, outside of like you said, local networks, like some of these regional networks have, the older guys that are still doing color, but it is all former athletes. And we're kind of seeing the similar thing on network television now. It seems like it used to kind of be a balance. You have a lot of former writers that have turned podcasters and now are talking heads for networks. Now, and it used to be, former players, but it seems like the scale is almost tipping to now networks love to sign former players. What do you think about that?
It's a star power. And look, if you have a chance to make Tom Brady, and if he wants to be an announcer, then I'm like, that's great.
Yeah.
As great as Greg Olson was, like, I want to try this because it's Tom Brady.
Yeah.
Like, stuff that comes out of his mouth has, and that's why they hire former athletes, right? There's a certain credibility, there's a certain power of their words just right off the bat that's different from if I was in the booth doing a game. It's just not going to be the same. At some point, do we get too caught up in it? I think so. I think probably so. I think probably people should be more open-minded. But you have to remember, especially with football, the people watching the games are not just super football people who are listening to Ringer podcasts. They're just people. And when they look at it, they're like, I know who Tom Brady is. I know who Tony Romo is. I know who Terry Bradshaw and Howie Long are, who are doing pregame this week here in New Orleans. Like, that matters to them.
Okay.
That just recognizability. When you get to like the smart, really, really smart people we talk about, the Mina Kimes, the Dan Orlovsky, a lot of people are just watching TV are just like, I don't know that person just because I don't follow it on that level.
Yeah.
So I think that's the way the networks think. Now that we can make an argument that they should broaden their horizons and hire different people, and I agree with that to an extent, but that's their thinking.
Brian, we are running low on time, so the last thing I want to ask you is we got to bring it back. We're here for the big game. We're here to cover it. Give us your prediction
Oh, my
for
God.
Super Bowl 59.
Well, thank you for offering to let me record 2 predictions before we came on here, so that we could just
you
play.
You can't
Did I
tell the
blow? Oh wait, I
cameras.
blew this. I
Yeah.
wasn't supposed to say that in
Oh.
the microphone.
Can you cut that out?
Yeah, we can work it.
All of
right.
this will be cut out.
Okay,
right?
yeah.
No, we're good.
What
We're
do you
good.
We'll
call
fix it in post.
I actually think the Chiefs are going to win this game.
Yeah.
And the reason I think the Chiefs are going to win this game is because they win every close game. And until they stop winning a close game, I think it's Chiefs. I think it's going to be a very close game, actually. Probably a lot like the AFC Championship game, but I think the Chiefs are going to win it now.
I have one last question for you about the officiating. If this game comes down to a call,
Oh, no.
will X just absolutely erupt? Do you think it'll erupt even bigger than potentially the Luka trade?
Yeah.
Like, I think, social media might explode.
And I'll tell you what, I think that's part of the Chiefs' villainy thing. It's because they're not really villains. People need a data point.
Yeah.
So they've picked the refs. Okay, we need to get mad at the Chiefs. We don't actually have like a Spygate or a deflated football scandal. So I know the refs are in the tank for them, and they will go crazy on that. I mean, if anything, by the way. And you can ignore all the calls that go the Eagles' way and just pick. That's the great part about complaining about officiating. You don't actually need a real data set. You just need one thing to get mad at.
You need one call. I love when they show like the amount of penalties and the yards. I'm pretty sure the Bills have more penalties, or the Chiefs have more penalties in yards, but yet, of course, the attention is always drawn to the Chiefs.
Absolutely. That's the way you play this game. As a college football fan, that's the way you do this, right? You remember all the calls that went against you. You don't remember any of the calls that went your way.
Brian Curtis of The Ringer, thank you very much for joining us. Really appreciate it. Have a great Radio Row. I know this is your Super Bowl, so go kill it.
Thank you very much. I'm going to do my best to appreciate the beauty and horror of this wonderful place.
What a way to end it. Brian Curtis of The Ringer, Justin Antonucci, and Parker Holland Donor signing off.
Well, we are back here live here in New Orleans at Radio Row for the Radio Row Review, and today we are joined here by host of SiriusXM's Mad Dog Sports Show, DA himself, Damon Amendolara. Mr. Amendolara, thank you so much for your time today.
My pleasure. No need to use the mister. I'm glad to be here with you guys.
Thank you so much, DA. And DA, first question for you. There's been a lot of big breaking NFL news, specifically with trade requests coming out over the last couple of days. I'm going to start with Myles Garrett. Who do you think are the teams that are making calls right now to the Browns in order to try and land Myles Garrett?
Well, I think about the Buffalo Bills as a potential fit because they've got a defense that creates turnovers, but they really need a better pass rush to catch up with those incredible quarterbacks in the AFC. Now, they were able to get through the Ravens and Lamar Jackson, but you have Lamar coming back, you have Joe Burrow coming back, and, of course, you have Patrick Mahomes that you just simply cannot get through. So I think about the Bills as a potential match. I also think about the Washington Commanders. This is a team that right now does not have to pay its quarterback. Jaden Daniels on a rookie deal. They're good enough to get to an NFC Championship game this year. Imagine the potential of adding a guy like Myles Garrett that, can immediately wreck a game plan, and you have the salary cap space to use on him. So I think those are two that to me make a lot of sense.
And going back to the Bills real quick, do you think if they were able to land Garrett, do you think that would be the piece that would finally take them over the top and finally push them over the Chiefs?
I think it's a pretty good bet that if you're trying to chase down the Kansas City Chiefs, what we saw is you have to make Patrick Mahomes uncomfortable. And unfortunately, in all these losses, Mahomes has rarely, if ever, been uncomfortable. And Myles Garrett is the type of guy. He's a kind of a one of one. There's not many guys like him. So, yeah, I would say that if you get Myles Garrett, they were 3 points, worse than the Kansas City Chiefs without him. I think with him, that's a significant upgrade.
And then now I'm going to switch over to Cooper Kupp, the other one who requested a trade request from the Los Angeles Rams. What teams do you think are going to be interested in him, and where do you think his best landing spot would be and where he would want to go?
I like to pair Cooper Kupp potentially with a young QB. I look at Adam Thielen in Carolina, who I think has really helped out Bryce Young. Dependable route runner, good hands, veteran presence, been around the block. I think that's the type of team that you're looking for. Now, for Cooper, if you're going to trade for him, I'm not going to try to trade anything more than a third rounder. Anything higher than that, I wouldn't do. I'd prefer it to be a late third rounder, maybe early fourth rounder. So I don't think you got to go crazy going after this guy. But if you got a young quarterback and you have a third rounder or a fourth rounder to play with, I think that's the type of pairing that makes a lot of sense.
And there's been a lot of course, the head coaching cycle is just finishing up, as probably the Saints will be one of the last ones to officially hire their head coach. Of course, there are a lot of rumors that it's going to be Kellen Moore. Who do you think will be the best head coach out of that cycle?
Well, Mike Vrabel's the most. He seems like the surest bet to still be a successful head coach. He did not win a Super Bowl like Pete Carroll, but he's got a lot of years, and he's got a franchise quarterback. So if you were to ask me, okay, when all's said and done, who has the most success out of this hiring cycle, I would say, if Mike Vrabel is there 7 years and goes to 4 postseasons and has an AFC championship game or something like that, that's probably a pretty good run for him. I don't think that Pete Carroll is in Vegas for a long time, but he's the most decorated, and I really like the hire. But again, if you're grading this on how high can these guys achieve at their spots, the Raiders are never going to make an AFC championship game in the near future. They've got so many things to fix, but I love that hire. Ben Johnson comes with the most pizzazz. But again, you're banking on that the Bears do something that the Bears rarely, if ever, do, and that's like put it all together and make a run in the playoffs and win playoff games. So I think Vrabel's the surest bet, although I do think there can be multiple success stories out of this cycle.
And speaking of Ben Johnson and the Bears, specifically, how do you think the pairing of Ben Johnson and Caleb Williams is going to go, and what do you think Ben Johnson is going to bring in order to help develop him going forward?
Well, the thing that Ben Johnson brings is specifically an offensive mind that has been able to develop an offense and attack that's very versatile. You know, in Detroit, they could kill you through the air. They could kill you on the ground. They had a lot of different ways to beat you. Clearly, Jared Goff played his best football with the Detroit Lions, even though they went to a Super Bowl with the Rams. I think his best football is being played at the moment. And I think you go to Chicago, and Caleb Williams should benefit from a head coach that knows that side of the football. He didn't have that last year. You benefit from an offensive mind who clearly has a lot of creative ideas and an offensive mind that knows how to utilize both sides of the attack. So all of that's got to help Caleb. But you know, anything is it's far from a sure bet when you hire a first-time head coach. I don't think they went wrong. That was the right hire. But I couldn't sit here and be like, oh, well, now everything's fixed in Chicago.
And then moving forward, looking a little bit ahead towards the NFL draft, and there's been a lot of controversy about whether or not a quarterback is going to go in the top 3 or first overall to the Titans. What is your take on that? Where do you think the top 2 quarterbacks, Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders, are going to land?
Well, your top 2 picks, your top 3 picks are all quarterback-needy teams. And there's only 2 quarterbacks in this draft that you can take that high. So if it's not those top 2 teams, it's those top 2 slots. I just don't see any way that Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders don't go 1 and 2. Because even if the Browns or the Titans are not convinced they're those guys, they'll trade that pick to somebody who needs to get up there. The Giants have to have a quarterback. The Raiders have to have a quarterback. You know, the Browns have to have a quarterback. The Titans have to have a quarterback. Somebody's going to move up into those top 2 slots. So I think those 2 guys go in the top 2. Question is, are they deserving of the top 2 slots? I don't think so, but they're going to be taken no matter what.
And who is your favorite draft prospect in this upcoming draft? Who is the guy that you think is going to do the best in the NFL?
Well, I mean, look, Travis Hunter, I think, is the most exciting player in this draft, and so I'm most excited to see him because we really haven't had a true two-way player, I mean, really since Deion and Bo, and that's 30 years ago. And I think he's got the potential to do so. He's great on both sides of the football, and I don't see that changing in the NFL. If you're going to draft him, let's say 3rd overall, and you want him to play both sides of the football, you know? So he's, to me, the most intriguing draft prospect.
And now I'm going to switch over a little bit and talk about the Saints a little bit. We're here in New Orleans. What do you think, if Kellen Moore is their hire, is going to bring it to the Saints in order to try and revive them a little bit?
Well, I think he's got a lot to work on because you don't have your quarterback situation steadied and you don't have any salary cap space. So this is going to be a 1 step back before you take 2 steps forward. So Kellen Moore just at this point, I think, needs to bring a long-term plan. I think that the Saints were playing on a short-term plan the last couple of years, thinking they could maybe go all in for a playoff run. It blew up in their face. So if I'm Kellen Moore, I'm going to the table to Mickey Loomis and saying, okay, this is what we do year 1, but this is also what I have planned for year 4, year 5, and beyond.
And my final question for you, DA, what is your Super Bowl 59 prediction? I know it's a tough question. There have been a lot of hot takes about the big game on Sunday. What is your take on it?
I like the Chiefs. Give me the Chiefs 26, 23, something like that. I think it's a game played in the 20s, not the 30s. I don't think it's going to be the explosion of offense that we saw 2 years ago. I still just simply cannot bet against the Chiefs in a big spot like this. I thought that the Bills could have done it last week or 2 weeks ago. I kind of feel like that was the de facto Super Bowl. The Eagles are really, really good, but this is a Chiefs team that has been here, done that, and always finds a way to do it at the very end. So I'm gonna expect them to do the same thing.
Damon Amendola, DA from SiriusXM's Mad Dog Sports Show. Thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure. Anytime.
We are back here live on the Radio Row Review here in New Orleans, and today we are joined by play-by-play commentator for Saints on WWL Radio and media relations manager for ASM Global and the Louisiana Stadium and Exposition District, Mike Haas. Mr. Haas, Mike, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me.
No, this is great. It's my first time to Radio Row this year, so it's amazing what this has become. It's the lifeblood really of the week, and so no, it's a thrill for me to talk about the Superdome and to talk about the Saints. So I uniquely wear 2 hats, and I can flip them as need be.
And how have you enjoyed having the Super Bowl back in New Orleans, such a historic city with it hosting so many Super Bowls? How does it feel to have yet another one back here in the Big Easy?
Well, the coolest part for us is, so it's the 11th for the city, tying South Florida, and it's the 8th in the building, which it's breaking its own record, but it's a new building. So if you were here in 2013 or, 02, 97, it's a completely different animal. So we really are rolling out this new building to the world. And we had the unique opportunity in 2024 to have a Saints season with this building, have 3 Taylor Swift shows back to back to back. So that has been the fun part. For people that know the building, it is a completely new building. And to do what we did after 50 years, 2025 will be our 50th anniversary, is simply outstanding.
And I was just going to ask you about that. With the stadium now going on to its 50th anniversary, how does it feel to continuously have the city and Louisiana itself continue to invest in the stadium rather than tear the Superdome down and build a new stadium somewhere else in New Orleans?
I think it's going to be really the model of things to come. We know that already a lot of other stadiums have reached out to us and said, hey, new stadiums are $3, $4, $5 billion. And the truth of the matter is, in 20 years, because they're building them to today's hot standards, 25 years they'll be obsolete, right? So you were able to take a building that's 50 years old, and it was not what we call architecturally dead, right? You bring people in, they go, nah, you can't do anything, right? Our founding fathers back in the 60s with pencils and protractors built a building with 2 million square feet. 2 million square feet. The Houston Astrodome was the only other building of its kind in that time that they used as a model. It fits inside. So without that, you would have had to do something different. But to have 2 million square feet to work with, it was not architecturally obsolete. And you had some things to work with. And so I believe just because of the interest we have had, that other stadiums will look at what can we do, right? Because I know Arrowhead, a lot of these older stadiums that are vested. Now, we didn't have the luxury like Minnesota Stadium. ASM manages that U.S. Bank. And so they just moved down the street. A couple of miles, played at Minnesota, piece of cake. We don't have that luxury. We are landlocked with buildings and interstates. So not in my lifetime, but in some lifetime, 20, 30 years from now, there will have to be a decision. But the unique part of this renovation to me was that took a building that's 25, 50 years old, trying to increase its life. Oh, and you can't touch the outside, right? The iconic exterior. So you weren't putting the camo back on. We weren't going bigger. We weren't going wider. That's it. It's a finite space, and you had to do it within the framework of Saints football, Essence Fest, which is our big summer festival. We had the Final Four in 2022. So you had a window to work which was very finite. And you didn't even know when the Saints season was going to end. But when it ended, it was unbelievable. So it had to be done in the off seasons. And so again, I think that will become more of a model for places that don't have the luxury to just shut it down and go somewhere for 2 years, like Buffalo. Just build it next door, right? And then we'll tear this one down, and this will be the parking lot, and you go there. We just didn't have that luxury.
And I want to talk about what makes the Superdome special, because we got to experience it last night at Media Night, but there's a certain community feel about it, and there's just a certain charm to the Superdome that you don't see with a lot of stadiums. What is it that makes that stadium so special, not just to the city and to the team and to you, but to the entire community of New Orleans?
Well, it is special, right? And I've, as the play-by-play guy, I've not been in all of them, but I've been in 80% of the stadiums, and a lot of them the new ones, right? And they're beautiful. They lack soul. They lack character. And that only comes because we've cried in that building together. We've cheered in that building together. We have prayed in that building together. Your section and your people next to you, your season ticket holders, they're friends, It's the one place. Race means nothing on Sunday. How much money you make means nothing on Sunday if you're a Saints fan. But yeah, I've always called it a community building. Most people have no idea the number of events, job fairs, conventions. My daughter went to homecoming there. I went, homecoming in the Superdome? Weddings, funerals, graduations, hundreds of events a year. You hear a lot about the Saints game, Sugar Bowl, Bayou Classic, Essence, all phenomenal, legendary events. But there's really a lot more, and I think that community spirit, Katrina and all that it was, the rebirth in '06, it just has it's a person, it's a life. It has a soul and character that other stadiums just don't have.
And talking about the Superdome and specifically this renovation, can you talk a little bit about what actual construction was done to the building in terms of removing some of the old parts and building in new things for fans to increase the experience for them?
Right, so it's a rare renovation that you are driven by fan experience. It's not driven by point of sale, it's not driven by whatever. It's driven by the fan experience, which was one of the foundational blocks of the architects 50 years ago. The fan was king. It's a great building. It was built for multi-purpose, meaning baseball, right? That's why our stands go way out. They hang out. Everybody has a roof over their head. It was a very tight building, despite the 2 million square feet. So the goal was to open it up, right? Our concourses were tight. We had what I won't call them wasted space because people love them, but on each sideline you had interior ramps, up and down, up and down. That's how you got to your seat. Not primarily. It was a secondary, I hate to do this, ingress and egress, the two words I dread the most, but I say them now. You didn't get in and out, but you used them secondarily. So, but you take those out, you just gained 80,000 square feet of space, front of house space for clubs, bars. All of your concourses got wider. Your suites got wider. And so then we took the flooring where the ramps used to be and carried it to the edge of the building. Never did that before. So we took a 50-year-old building and recaptured 100,000 square feet of fan-facing space because we got rid of the ramps. And then because we added the floors on each level, we recaptured another 50,000 square feet back of house, kitchens, pantries, everything, elevators. And we put in escalators in 3 of our lobbies, if you will. So that's how people traverse the building, on 3 escalators from the bottom to the top in 3 minutes. So in a nutshell, that's it. Fans, new space, wider spaces, efficiency, and we changed the way people watch the game. We changed the way you get into the game. We changed the way you get concessions. There's a lot of the market approach where you just kind of go in, you grab your food, you come out, you pay, you're done. We have a 40-yard bar, a 70-yard club. Sometimes size does matter because we have space. But that's the key. Without the 2 million square feet that our founding fathers did back in the 60s, you aren't able to do what you did.
And going off of that, and you specifically talked about the things like the club area and the 40-yard bar and things about that. And how has it been since Caesars has taken over as the naming rights, and what have they really done to try and increase their fan experience for the club level area specifically? It's
a continuation from Mercedes. Mercedes-Benz had the building. Their headquarters moved to Atlanta. It's kind of like, well, what are we going to do? We got to have a, And so for 2 years, we had the Mercedes-Benz Stadium and the Mercedes-Benz Superdome. I think really it's about continuing the fan experience with the clubs, and more so than anywhere. The difference in our building than, say, most buildings is that we are built with a huge terrace, 30,000 plus. So that's your Joe Smith. That's not your average fan. There's no average fan, but that's your lower cost tickets, if you will. And most stadiums, if you build new, the up is small, 5, 10, 15,000, and then push down the premium. We don't have that luxury. We have 30,000 people up there. So you had to be able to kind of make it better for them, make it better on the way down, make the viewing better. So, and obviously, we know what's coming, right? Gambling's here. It's coming. What it will look like 5 years from now, I have no idea. No idea. And so it's about, people go to a game with laptops and phones and iPads. It's multiple screens. There's never enough Wi-Fi and DAS. Never enough. So that's been part of it's been seamless. They've been great. Hotel and casino down the street. And kind of the cool part, Mercedes still has the end zone club. They didn't just desert. They stayed a part of it, which I thought was pretty cool.
Yeah, and you kind of talk about that going into the future with Caesars, but what do you see the future of the stadium looking like now that these renovations have been, for the most part, completed?
Well, uniquely, we're like an airport. We are never done, right? We're always in a state of work of some kind. We didn't really do a lot with our end zones in this. We focused a lot on the sidelines because that's where the ramps were. So end zones will be a factor. And we're a self-funded building. We get money from a hotel motel tax in different areas, but we do it by our own concerts, our own shows, all the stuff. We don't go hat in hand to the state just asking for money, but there's audio upgrades, seats, the end zones. There's a lot on the wish list that will always be done. You don't know, there won't be these big ones, right? But in 2016, we put in the new video boards and added this. In 2012, we did that. We moved the press box from the 300 level to the 700 level. So when I was a sports anchor, I was in the 300 level, and it was great. And now I'm up in the 700 level, which is still great, but it's just different. So it's always in a state of how do we make it better? Because you have to. It's not a rotation anymore for anything. College football, Sugar Bowl, nothing's a rotation. You got to go out and earn it. 2013 was our last Super Bowl. They don't come like they used to. Still our 11th, but they don't come like they used to. The competition is huge. You build a new stadium, Nashville, Buffalo, SoFi, all these places, you're going to get a Super Bowl.
And now switching over, we've talked so much about the Superdome itself, but now switching over to the team that calls it home, the Saints specifically. I want to start off with asking, obviously, the Saints are still in their head coaching search. They are still looking to hire a head coach officially. There are rumors that Kellen Moore is going to be the head coach. What would you like to see from him if he does get hired, and do you think that he will be hired as the Saints head coach?
Yeah, I think he's the next head coach just because of the way the process works. Can't do anything this week. Everybody else who was close dropped out so that it wouldn't look like they didn't get the job. And so, yeah, I think he brings a unique situation. You really hope that Philly looks great on Sunday from an offensive standpoint. He's 36, right? Derek Carr's will be 34 when the season starts. They played each other in college, and I think you want, although the defense had problems, you really do want a bright offensive mind. He's not a first-year coordinator. I think we anoint these first-year coordinators too much, too easily. With the Chargers, with Dallas, with Philly, he's proven himself. And so the question is, what tools does he have? You got to be a Derek Carr fan, first off, because he's your quarterback, right? Either if you don't, you're going to have to find a way not to have Derek Carr, and it's going to be costly. But I think he likes Derek Carr. I mean, Derek Carr won the only games the team won last year. Now, for whatever reason, your listeners won't know this. You're either a Derek Carr fan or you're not. There's no middle of the fence with Derek Carr. But he's your guy. And, they're 50-some million over the cap. They always are. They've kicked the can down the road so many years in a row, pushing their chips to the middle to win a Super Bowl, which they should have won after the 2018 season and didn't. So now they're in kind of a trick bag. So Kellen Moore's going to be the guy. They don't, he'll bring his staff in. He said he's going to call the plays, have talent. They don't have enough playmakers. I mean, just playmakers. And hopefully they can address that. They have 9 picks in the draft. First time they've picked in the top 10 since 2008. My gosh. So I'm excited just because it will. Now, you don't want to have, this is our third head coach in 4 years. Sean in 21, Dennis in 22, Rizzi really last year, and now what I think will be Kellen Moore. So we'll see. I think it's, I don't think fans are pumped up, ready to go out and buy a ton of tickets. But you win a few games, everything will be forgotten. Derek Carr, they'll build a statue.
And you said something that caught my attention a little bit in your last answer, where you talked about how most teams nowadays want an offensive-minded head coach. For the future of the NFL, do you think that is going to continue down the stretch, that eventually all head coaches will be offensive-minded, or for at least the large majority will?
I think a large majority will. Then I think the key will be you got to get a good defensive coordinator, because we've learned, I don't care, if you can't, and this is so simple, but this is the Saints in a nutshell, could not stop the run in any capacity. could not run the ball in any capacity. The rest of the things on that list matter none, zero. So I think, I'll be honest, and this is my opinion. I would like to have a head coach who just runs the game. Have an offensive coordinator. That offensive coordinator is going to run your head coach's plan. He didn't have to call the plays and have a defensive coordinator. And you just be a game manager. It is an entirely difficult job. So we'll see. But I feel like offense sells, right? Defense wins games, but offense sells. So I think you're going to see more. Although Aaron Glenn was a defensive guy, I think you'll see some. But for the most part, I do believe it'll be offense. You see Liam Cohen, you see Dave Canales last year, these first-year hot coordinators. Anybody, in the McDaniels tree and then, the McVay tree. So I think that's the way it'll be. Now, the difference will be, 2 years ago, we were like, why do we even have running backs on the team, right? We went from there to, oh, my God, if you ain't got a stud running back, you're in trouble. Like, what happened? I don't know. I missed a meeting on that. Look at Saquon Barkley, perfect example. So I think the resurgence of the importance of the running game will make a difference.
And besides the addition of more on the coaching staff, is there really one spot that you want to see the Saints kind of build back towards during the offseason to kind of get back to where they need to be?
I feel like it's either there's no place that doesn't need help. I feel like running back, I don't know Alvin's situation, and I also wide receiver. Yeah, you got playmakers in Olave and Rashid Shaheed. They got hurt, right? And Olave is a great third down back. He's not your burner. Shaheed's your burner. But I don't know if I want him out there 40 plays a game. He just does so much from a special team. So you need playmakers, and you have the opportunity. I think it's 6 picks in the top 93. So you got to get some playmakers, offense, wide receiver, running back. You can never have not enough offensive linemen. But, man, you got to get playmakers. You got to make guys that can make the difference. And I don't think they had that last year. They did when they were healthy. They scored 91 points the first 2 games. Nobody was going, oh, my God, you need playmakers, right? But when they get hurt, it makes a big difference.
And my final question for you, Mike, and we've asked every single interview this question on Radio Row so far this week. What is your prediction for the Super Bowl? I know it's a tough question. I know it's a difficult one, but I need a prediction from you.
All right. Well, first off, I will say this about Kansas City. I don't understand the vitriol and the flu. Forget Super Bowls, right? Take Super Bowls out of the mix. The Saints have been around for, 58 years? They've been to three NFC championship games. That's how hard it is. Right after the Saints, the Chiefs came in on like 60 or 70 when they became the Kansas City. They were Dallas Texans. Prior to Patrick Mahomes' arrival, they went to three AFC championship games. That's how hard it is. He's been to 7 straight. Forget the Super Bowls. This is unprecedented. Never happened again. 7 straight Super Bowls. They've only played 2 games on the road since he started in 2018, and they won both of those. So, all right, I just say that because we need to celebrate that. I don't care if you're tired of them. I don't care about it. 7 straight AFC championship games, give me a break. Philly, we played both teams. We have the uniqueness of playing both teams. I will pick Philly because of their defensive front. Nobody, Carter, Davis, Zach Bond, unfortunately, C.J. Gardner. I mean, that front with Davis and Carter is unmatched. They are the best front line I've ever seen, and they can dial up pressure with just those two. You don't need a lot of help from everybody else. So I think it's going to be close. Every game Kansas City plays is close. So I'm picking Philly.
Mike Haas.
Probably the only guy in the room, but whatever.
Mike Haas, play-by-play broadcaster for the Saints. Thank you so much for your time.
Gentlemen, appreciate it. Best of luck to you.
Justin Antonucci and Parker Hollandone are here with Ithaca alum and writer for The Athletic, Andrew Marchand. Andrew, thank you so much for hopping on the show with us. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's my pleasure.
Of course. So I talked to some of the guys that you spoke to last year, and the first thing they said is you're the analyst of broadcast. You're really into sports media. Before we get into that, you just recently moved over to The Athletic. You enjoying that move?
Yeah, I love it. It was about a year ago that I made the move from the New York Post to The Athletic, and it's been more than I even anticipated. It's been great. This top class editors and fellow writers, and so yeah, it's been a pleasure.
What is it like being specifically at The Athletic? Because obviously it's a content machine. The Athletic probably posts, what, 100 times a day is what it
At
felt like
least,
whenever
probably more. I'd say,
whenever when I have the app for a while, it's usually just absolutely mental how many notifications I get just for my favorite teams. What is that work cycle like compared to just the straight up New York media cycle?
So for me, it's not that much different. The biggest difference is, at the New York Post and when I was at ESPN, I was a little more focused on what I was covering. At ESPN, I covered the Yankees. At the Post, I covered sports media, but I did do a lot of national stuff, but I did local stuff. Now, I had a big story with Stuart Mandel during this past year, about college football and, the idea of a super league. And I worked on some investigative pieces, or one specifically with Katie Strang on ESPN. So we collaborate a lot, great teamwork at the New York Post, but it's a little bit larger in terms of the sports staff. At The Athletic, there's 400 writers, and so when you add all those people together, in a good way, you get drawn in with a lot of different people and kind of encourage teamwork.
Yeah, so really excited to hear about what you do now for The Athletic. But let's rewind the clock a little bit to your time at IC. Listen, the Bomber faithful, all of us, really passionate about the school. So kind of tell us about your time at IC, your time at WICB, ICTV. How was that experience, especially preparing you for this world today?
Yeah, so I was the sports director at WICB back in.
That's our guy Toby. He does the job now.
Toby, nice. All right, great legacy to live up to. So I guess I think I was a junior. I graduated in '96. So actually, might be my senior year. Regardless, either way. So yeah, it was a great experience. The biggest thing about Ithaca that I think makes it stand out is you get hands-on experience. One of my first days freshman year, I was doing an update at maybe 6 in the morning on WVIC, and
the Vic.
Yeah, the Vic. John Mita-Perrell, who's now the voice of Boston College football. He was on WICB, and he was a junior. I was a freshman. And I said to him, how do I get on WICB? And I was an eager beaver. And he said to me, Andrew, it's not ESPN. Just relax a little bit. And now Mita-Perrell and I do a podcast together under Marchand Sports Media. I own the podcast. We do Tuesdays. It's Marchand and Mita-Perrell. Everybody loves sports media. And then on Thursdays, I have guests like Peter King, Adam Schefter, and so so it was very formative. I also went to London for a semester and had an internship with the London Towers basketball team. But yeah, I wouldn't. And my wife went to Ithaca as well, so it all worked out for me.
That's awesome. Do you have any stories about the town Ithaca that still resonate with you today?
I think you guys aren't going to know this, but maybe some of your listeners will. There is a pizza place called Cristiano's.
My dad's also an alum.
Oh,
he graduated in '94, but he raved about Cristiano's.
Yeah, so Cristiano's.
Now.
Yeah, so we used to you go out in the Commons, and then after everyone would be like Cristiano's, and I don't know I don't want to. I think there's a pretty good story behind why it closed, but I don't know it specifically. It was after I graduated, but yeah, so Cristiano's. I was very focused on my career. At ICB. Me and a couple other people, we won NBSH, I think it's called Arrow Award for the best pregame for Countdown to Kickoff.
Oh man, that's funny. Me and Toby did CTK last year together.
Okay,
for
nice.
The football crew.
Yeah, so we did that, and then the other big thing was we got a little bit in trouble with the coach at the time, Mike Welch, because
we've heard a lot of Mike Welch stories, a lot of Mike Welch horror stories.
Yeah,
good coach.
It was probably good for me just to kind of get that experience, but they lost a homecoming game, and he played the backup quarterback in the second quarter, kind of thinking, and then they ended up losing. I think I wrote a column sort of criticizing him. And I don't blame, no offense to you guys, but looking back, if I don't know how old he was at the time, but let's say he was in his 40s or something. There's some, 19-year-old kid just saying, criticizing him. But then we were on the, sports talk on Sunday nights. They barred any of the football players coming on the air with Dorian Lauer. Now Scott Lowry was the voice of the Charlotte Hornets, and then Kevin Connors from ESPN. Those are two of my roommates back then.
No way, you were with Connors. That's awesome.
So yeah, it was good. And so those are a couple memories.
Well, yeah, so you had that rise, obviously, at IC. Did you always know that you wanted to do analysis and writing as the primary thing, or did you, in your college time, kind of dip your toe into the other stuff? Because obviously we've all had the opportunity in the bigger program to dip our toes into play-by-play and color and sideline reporting and also talk shows, and you can go right at the Ithacan. So did you always have, you said you were career-focused, have you always been focused on the writing and analysis, or did you spread out a little bit?
Yeah, I wasn't sure. I've done broadcasting as well. When I was at ESPN, I was on SportsCenter a lot, and I covered the Alex Rodriguez steroids thing a lot, so I was on TV a lot for that. And when I first left, I was at the Post for 9 years, then went to ESPN for 11, and then back to the Post. I went into radio, so I've done all three. And in college, I did as well. So I could have probably been the sports editor of the newspaper, but I didn't want to be. But I wrote a lot. I was very active at WICB. I kind of joked a couple weeks ago with Mita Perel that I had trouble getting on ICTV and it was political, but then I said maybe I wasn't good. It would have been one of the, but it was a little political. So
I'll tell you that has not changed.
Yeah, so it was a little political. There are a couple of people there. I won't name names, but I think like they thought they were Ruin Ardledge or Dick Ebersol or something in terms of.
I mean, are they big now? Can you name names? And
I think I have an idea of one of you might be talking about.
Fair enough.
No, well, I don't even know. It's here nor there at that point. I kind of looked young, maybe I don't. Who knows? But it worked out for me. I can't complain at all. I wouldn't change a thing. But I was focused more on the radio station, the newspaper, and I did a little TV, but.
So I mentioned in the open you are kind of the analyst of the sports media analysts. How did you find that niche? When you're in college, you don't really think that you can cover just other broadcasters for a living.
Yeah.
You write a lot about that. How did you find that interest and then, of course, excel at that? And now, you're putting out amazing articles. The Brady article you put out the other day. Kind of just talk us through that whole process of really finding that niche in this world that is, you can really cover anything.
So I just, for whatever reason, had a passion for it. Growing up, Phil Mushnick at the New York Post is a legendary sports media columnist. Rudy Martzke, who just passed away, his column was renowned on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays on the second page of USA Today. There are others, Bob Raceman. And I just loved that. I was very, funny story, when I was just very into, this is a little weird, okay? So I admit this is like a weird thing. When I was a sophomore at Ithaca, my name's Andrew Marchand. I changed my name to Drew Marchand. You say, well, why did you do that? Well, if you looked at the most successful sportscasters, Bob Costas, Al Michaels, Chris Berman, Marv Albert, one syllable, two syllable. So, so I said, I can't, Andrew Marchand, two syllable. And so I changed it. And then everyone started calling me Drew. Not that, and I know you guys have great listenership. Not that everybody was like listening to WICB. Maybe they were, But you do the updates. Drew Marchand, 92 WICB, and I didn't really like that. I like my name Andrew.
It's really funny you say that. I have a quick personal story. My name was supposed to be Andrew Justin. I'm Justin Andrew.
Okay.
But my parents did not name me Andrew first because they did not want people calling me Drew. So it's really funny you say that. Really, that's fun.
Wait, it's Andrew Justin.
Yes. So I was gonna be Andrew Justin, but my.
But I gotta tell you, I think. Let me hear you say Andrew Justin 92 WICB.
Andrew. Well, no, yeah.
Andrew Justin Antonucci.
So my last name's Antonucci.
Why do I kind of
okay.
First name, middle name? I was
Why do I kind of like Andrew Justin Antonucci though? That kind of rocks.
Like I look like an Andrew, but I just thought that was really funny that you said that. You didn't love being called
Andrew,
Drew.
no, that works. Now you're double syllable.
Yeah.
Triple syllable. It's the mold's been broken. I mean, there's people I could go. There's a long list. I don't think I didn't become Bob Costas because I had, double syllable.
I don't know. Bob Costas does have zip to it. But when you have like a passion like that, because it's not necessarily your job to be analyzing all of this scope of sports media, but because you're passionate about it, I'm guessing you have more insight on it than most. You definitely do. We know that. You've observed this transition we've had to the advent of the professional athlete immediately coming to broadcast and the rise of the social media journalist. What shape do you see this great industry of ours taking as we kind of settle into what is the modern era?
So it's changing, and if I'm a young person coming out of Ithaca, I think there's a lot of opportunity. I think the core of what you need to do doesn't change, and I think it's in some regards more of a meritocracy than it was when I was coming out, although there probably are less jobs. So that's good and bad, because when I came out, and so I worked at 2 small newspapers for a year and a half in Texas. Then I went to the New York Post, and I was fortunate about a year and a half in, I got promoted to cover the New York Mets. And
Go Mets.
so that was very lucky. But I needed somebody to anoint me to do that, right? Not that I didn't deserve it or whatever, but someone in a glass office had to say, you're the guy for this. And now you've got a chance to, it's hard to cut through, but where you could just put your work out there. You could have a blog. You could have a podcast. Most of them aren't either read or listened to that much, but you can hone your skills on your own. You don't need to be hired. You know, when I went to newspapers out of college, there's a feeling you needed to be at a daily newspaper. So I was first at a twice weekly called the Liberty Vindicator. It's in the middle of nowhere, Texas. Then I went to the Texas City Sun, which is on the Gulf Coast of Texas. Then I tried to get a job outside of Dallas, and this guy sent my resume to this place that was 2 hours away. I sent it for this job, but they were looking for people 2 hours away from Amarillo. Amarillo is known as the armpit of Texas. This was 2 hours from the armpit.
Hey, at least you pick warm weather.
Yes, but 2 hours from the armpit. I don't know what kind of body parts we're talking about.
Oh, boy.
So I did, but that was a daily newspaper. They basically offered me the job over the phone. And I was like, you're not meeting me. Do you need me to? And they said, most people, when they find out this is at the edge of the earth, they don't come. And so I didn't take the job, even though at that point. So my point is that it's changed. But I think there's opportunities.
And I'm curious, I just want to follow up on what you're talking about, the ability to put your work out there, because I am just a deeply cynical person, so I get curious about this from an expert on the subject. Do you really think that's going to work? Do you think we're going to see people who are making their own YouTube show and who put out their own content, like, let's say, my hour-long VIC radio talk show? Do you think that there is a real chance that people like us at this level can continue to put that work out there and that will get noticed?
Well, I think niche is important. You asked me, I took a chance. I left ESPN after 11 years, and they wanted me to stay. And I wanted to do this because it's where my passion is. I also felt like there's an audience for it, and it's been it's been proven true. And I'm happy for it because I didn't want to. I like covering the Yankees and covering baseball, but I didn't want to do it the rest of my life. So, to answer your question, can you just, from Ithaca College, just talk about the Super Bowl and and stand out? Unlikely, very unlikely. Could you be a talk show host? Yes, that's going to take time to accomplish that. But look, I don't think it wasn't easy back then. It's not necessarily easy now. I think you have to have belief. If you want my big piece of advice that I tell every young person, if I were in your guys' shoes, I would email 5 people a day and try to get their advice. Not get a job, get their advice. And if you did that for 4 years or 4 months, some people will get back to you. Not everybody. You might be 1 out of 10, whatever. 1 out of 10 is better. And that might sound extreme, but it's just a simple email. I like your work. I'd love to, just first start off an email, your advice. I'd love to get to your position one day. I think you build that way, and then the other thing you need to be doing is reps and doing what you guys are doing here and being on the air. If you want to do play-by-play, do a lot of play-by-play. It's hard work. I mean, it's not an easy field, like a lot of fields, and also there's no real roadmap.
And I want to transition this to the current state of sports media as well. I was talking about this with Brian Curtis yesterday. We had him on the show. We kind of talked about how we're in a golden age of sports broadcasters, especially the play-by-play. Do you believe that to be true, especially, just talking about the NBA, you got B.A., Ian Eagle, Kevin Harlan, Mike Breen, Mark Jones, the NFL he mentioned. You're getting a Joe Davis game. You're getting a Burkhart game. You're getting, Joe Buck. Do you believe that we are officially in a golden age of broadcasters, or do you almost think it's always been that way?
I think it's harder now in the sense of you're scrutinized more because of social media especially. I don't know. When I think about growing up, we had Costas, Marv Albert, Al Michaels. He's still going. Costas is still going somewhat. Dick Enberg. So I don't know. I also think I didn't look like I liked. You guys probably don't know Don Criqui, but he did the he was like the number 2 or 3 at NBC. We used to do playoff games. And I really he had a great voice. He worked with a guy named Bob Trumpy, former NFL tight end. And someone told me who's in the business, like Cricky used to make a million mistakes. Like social media, if it was around back then, they would have killed him. So I think I think there's a lot of great ones right now, but I don't know if it's any different than what was before.
And I want to talk about the article you wrote just the other day about Tom Brady. He's calling the Super Bowl, this year. How do you what's your take on that? Do you like Brady? Do you think that we're going to keep seeing these really, really high-profile athletes just step into a number one job, or is it kind of just, hey, it's Tom Brady?
Well, I think they offer him $375 million, and I broke that story a couple of years ago. If that's the case, then yeah, you'll see him. To answer your question about if he's good or bad, he's kind of a little bit boring in the sense from my perspective. He's a great subject because he's Tom Brady. He's considered the greatest quarterback of all time, maybe greatest player of all time in the NFL. But he's not great, but he's also not terrible. So he's sort of a little bit boring in terms of covering.
You like Olsen better?
Olsen's better.
Yeah.
Olsen's better.
But that's not why they hired him. Like,
Oh,
they
no,
want
yeah,
him to
100%.
They want him to be better, and he's okay. And I think if you looked at Olsen's development, Tom Brady's about 19 games in, maybe 20. Greg Olsen had a whole season. He did some games as a player, a couple games. Then he had a whole season as the number 2. He did some USFL, then now UFL games previously. So he had a little more experience. If you look at Tom Brady's development, now Greg Olsen was better from the start, but he also wasn't as scrutinized.
Yeah.
So I think Tom he's developing, but it's a big stage. But he's not. He got paid and is doing it. He's doing it because he got paid, and he got paid because he's Tom Brady.
Yeah.
Not because it's like, hey, he's going to be the greatest analyst of all time, and we want the best broadcast. No, they want Tom Brady.
Mm-hmm. And then, of course, Radio Row. We're here at the Super Bowl. Who's winning? At least in your opinion.
I'll take Fox is going to have a record ratings. Okay, keep it on media,
Big
which
winner.
I know what I'm talking about. So
Nah,
that's
that's
124.5 million, and then
Well, sorry, I don't
Yeah.
mean to cut you off, but I immediately want to follow up on that because that's something I'm super curious about. Because everyone, on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, is it saying, oh, this is going to be the least watched Super Bowl ever. No one's going to tune into this. And obviously that's the super sports fans. They're like, I'm sick of this.
Yeah.
But they're still going to watch. And then I think the casuals are still going to watch. So do you really think this will be one of the highest rated Super Bowls ever?
yeah, I think you nailed it. Well, a couple things there. Number one, don't listen to anything on X. Okay, get some good news sources. Subscribe to The Athletic, New York Times. Get watch them.
Just your Twitter notifications.
Yeah, get my Twitter notifications. You can look at it, but just don't. Everyone listening, just don't take everything you see on X. Take it with a grain of salt. Don't believe this fake news stuff. Like, look, there's problems with mainstream media. Don't believe that fake news. So, I think you nailed it, though. The people who are complaining about it, I don't want the Chiefs. You think they're not watching? If you care enough to say, I'm sick of the Chiefs, you think you're not watching Super Bowl? And then you get the record numbers on the edges. So you have Taylor Swift. Maybe she brings a couple people. People like stars. They like seeing Mahomes. They like seeing Kelsey. So I think you're going to see a record number. To answer your question on the game, I'll go Chiefs. I do this thing with my dad and my brother. We predict these games on a little text, so I got to remember my numbers here. I'll go Chiefs. I always do high scoring too. 38. Eagles 35.
I was hoping.
Is that what it was last? That might be exactly.
We
what it was
got.
last
Yeah, that was what it was last year.
was?
2 years ago.
Yeah,
Yeah.
when
We
the
got
Chiefs-
two. We got two 31-28s from Curtis and Asman. I was kind of
Where
waiting.
would they take?
They both took the Chiefs 31-28. So it seems like everyone's gonna think.
Exact score?
Yeah.
Were they on together?
No. Separate. So but
All right, I'm going to change it. 31-28.
All
No,
right,
I'm just
there-
kidding. Hat trick.
all right.
and then you're all right is what's going to end up happening.
Listen, I like the Chiefs. Well, I don't see how Mahomes loses this game. I don't think he compares to Hurts. But thank you so much for coming on, fellow Ithaca Bomber. Really appreciate you taking the time. Andrew Marchand of The Athletic, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Justin Antonucci and Parker Holland, owner drummer of the NFL Network's Adam Rank. Adam, thank you so much for hopping on the show with us.
No, it's my pleasure. Exciting. I love being at this event. I mean, I've been doing this for so long. I was, your guys' age when I first got an opportunity to do it. And I will tell you that I'm as excited now as I was the first time I ever walked through these doors. So thanks. And it's flattering to have people come up and want to talk to you. I'm trying to look at you in this. I'll hold it like this. But it's flattering when people come up, and you guys will find this, 10, 15 years from now. You'll be like, oh, my God. Like, people will be like, they'll want to interview you.
Yeah.
And it'll be really awesome.
Well, I was going to ask some fantasy football and some NFL questions, but
Please.
tell us about your start then. What was that first opportunity like for you on Radio Row?
I was working for NFL Publishing at the time. It was my internship in college. I went to Cal State Fullerton, which a lot of people refer to as the Harvard of the West Coast. And so it was my internship in college, and it was Super Bowl 37 in San Diego. And Media Day used to actually be on the field. Or no, I guess it was on the field on Monday night, so yeah. But it was a Tuesday afternoon, and the best part about it was, like, there was really, like, people trying to do serious journalism, and you still saw a little bit of it on Monday night, but, like, people are trying to do serious journalism, and then the wackiness had just started to kind of become a thing that everybody was like, oh, like people asking wacky questions or doing dumb things or just characters that now have just become commonplace on opening night, I think they call it. So it was really cool, and I remember running into Mark Long, who, if you're familiar with The Challenge on MTV, was one of the OGs. So if you watch MTV Challenge, like All Stars, the OGs, like Mark Long is the old dude who's still jacked out there doing it. And I was talking to him. I'm like, oh my God, like I know there was a famous, who was it? It was the Buccaneers. So like Keyshawn Johnson was 2 feet from me, but I'm like, but like Mark Long's here. Where's Kid Hoover? So it was really cool. And so as an intern and I actually was hired at that time, but still just being able to be around and running into Jim Rome.
Yeah.
And doing that kind of oh my God, Jim Rome's here.
Jim Rome.
Oh my God, I was a jungle dweller back in the day, a clone as they say. So it was just really cool, and I just wanted to take advantage of it and be a part of it and just enjoy every second, and I still do. And I go get all this free food. There's a Lambo. So for those of you who are not familiar with me, my name's Adam. Good to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
I'm a
Nice to meet you.
Chicago person. I'm a Chicago Bears fan. I don't live in Chicago. There's a Lambeau Field thing here promoting the draft.
Yes.
I'm going to go knock it down.
Listen.
No, I'm just kidding.
Hey, well,
No,
preserve
wait, that's a little too
preserve the
bad.
cheese curds. We've heard the cheese curds are really, really
I
good.
heard it's really good.
Will you refuse to try them, though?
I'm not eating them.
Well, yeah, you can't. Well,
Absolutely not.
Part of your big media persona, as we talk about the big media characters and the personas, has been your big, bold predictions, whether that
Yeah.
be for fantasy, whether that be the season-long ones that always end up bookmarked by everyone on Twitter.
100%.
And you've been big on owning, hey, I'm going to take big swings, and I'm going to hit on some of them, I'm
100%.
going to miss on some of them. Take me through that process, how you make the predictions, and then, just making sure that they're as entertaining as possible for all the people who love to watch them.
Well, thank you for saying that. You know what? Because when you look at the NFL, even though they design it this way, not everybody finishes 7-10 or 8-9 or 9-8. Some team is going to be terrible, and some team that you don't think is going to be good is actually going to be really good. And this season, it was the Washington Commanders who had the second overall pick in the draft. And they went on a great run this year. And I'm not going to take anything away from it. Jaden Daniels played excellent. They got a lot of breaks along the way, and we see that. I did not identify that. I was still looking at a team that, still had a lot of holes to fill. Usually what happens is, who's got holes to fill? Who's vulnerable? How do I feel about the coach? And then similarly, or not similarly, but I said that the Broncos were going to go 10-7, which nailed it. Nobody remembers that. Nobody brings that up. People in Denver do, but people don't. They're hey, they're you're just so wrong. Ever. I'm I said Saquon Barkley. I was just talking to Dan Horde of Cincinnati. We had Chase Brown as one of our fantasy guys coming into this season. Nobody remembers that.
I have my keeper league.
Hey,
They
flaming hot
remember.
takes. Give Adam some
They
love.
remember. They do remember things about the Commanders, which was awful, and it was really wrong on that. And but you just have to let everybody know what your process was. What did you think? Coming into the season, I thought Dan Quinn, a coach getting a second chance, I wasn't buying in. Cliff Kingsbury had not done very well as a head coach in Arizona. And Jaden Daniels, who I like, but I'm I don't know how his durability is going to be throughout the course of an NFL season. So I don't think you guys will be very good. And the Commanders fans had hated me for years because if you ever look back historically, I've always been right to the point of going into last season, the Commanders fans were damn it. I hate Rank. I hate that he's usually always right about us. I was famously wrong this year. But you just got to go out there and just put it out there with your chest. And I don't want to do it hot takes for the sake of hot takes. you got to have something to back it up.
Right.
Because you want to be called on it. And I talk to people in our building, like Brian Baldinger and all that, and be like, hey, like, what do you think about this pick? And he kind of thought I was wrong about Washington, and he ended up being correct.
And then I have to ask, we had someone on Front Office Sports earlier, and he mentioned that it's a little saltiness that Jaden Daniels played so much better than Caleb Williams this year. Does that bother you as well as a Bears fan?
Not as much. No.
All right.
I think ultimately, when we look back at Caleb Williams' career, we're going to say he's the better quarterback. I think he will be.
I don't think you're wrong in that aspect either.
And with Ben Johnson, we're going to find out pretty quickly whether that's going to be correct or not. So for me, that's not a big deal. I know the Commander fans trolling you about it. That was kind of like, but it's like, who cares? Like, oh, I'm glad you're happy with your guy. But for me, I think it could be a situation like if you're a Bengals fan or a Chiefs fan. I don't think Bengals fans would trade Joe Burrow for Patrick Mahomes. Like, I think that if our guy's good and your guy's good, I think it'll be fine. And honestly, I think that's exactly what the NFL needs. It's what we need in the NFC. Now, obviously, Jalen Hurts is the best quarterback in the conference. But if we were in a situation where Chicago and Washington are good every year, and Caleb and Jaden Daniels become the NFC version of Burrow and Mahomes and Allen and Lamar and all those guys, I think it's a win-win for both franchises.
Yeah, absolutely. You kind of took the words out of my mouth where I want to talk about the Bears going forward, because as much as it's been a franchise that has had struggles, especially in the last couple of years, it seems like everything's going in the right direction. They've built this incredible defense. They've got Caleb going into year 2, and I think everyone who has watched his tape knows, hey, there's something that's going to get unlocked. And now you add Ben Johnson. What do you think? Let's get a little preview here of what we're going to see on NFL Network in a couple months here. What do you think the ceiling is for these Bears?
12-5, lock it in.
All right.
I don't care about the schedule. We'll go through it. I'll find the wins. The NFL changes year to year anyways.
Even in the NFC North, sorry.
Well, okay, let's take a look at the NFC North. The Lions lost both their coordinators and a ton of coaches because Aaron Glenn and Ben Johnson both took a ton of Antoine Randall and some other.
Passing game coordinator goes to the Jets.
Yes, and they did get Fraley to stay, which was good. That was huge for them. They needed that. They just got Brian Shaw, so that's good. So they're not going to jump. They're not going to fall off a cliff. I think they'll still be very competitive, probably about a 9-win team. Minnesota will likely be starting a quarterback in his first year. I think J.J. McCarthy is going to be the starting quarterback, and we don't know what we're going to get out of rookies. I mean, Jaden Daniels, Drake May, Bo Nix all showed this season. Even Caleb threw for 3,200, 3,500 yards and 20 touchdowns. It's not the death knell to have a rookie quarterback, but still it's going to be a little bit of a transition for them. And then the Packers are the Packers. The Packers only play for Toyotathon. They should change their name. It's not Titletown, it's Toyotathon Town. That's all they care about. Matt LaFleur going out there looking well manicured. He's a handsome guy.
He's got a nice beard.
Well put together.
So do you, though.
Thank
I
you
like
so
the
much.
beard.
I appreciate you saying that. But Matt LaFleur is the only guy who gets his gear outfitted by Lululemon. The rest of them go with everybody else, like whatever. And it's fine. Well, you know what the Green Bay Packers are. So I don't think that the NFC North is as daunting as everybody wants to make it out to be. And I think that the Bears, you go into every season thinking probably split the division. Yeah. Okay, 3-3. But there is an opportunity to switch that to 4-2. We saw this year, Green Bay and Chicago each won only one divisional game. So there's some changes to be made there. So I think there's an opportunity for the Bears, and I'm going to be bullish on them. And I'm biased.
Yeah, no, of course. But quickly, I do want to ask, you talked about having a bad-ish relationship with Commanders fans. They're kind of sick of you. Is there an NFL team for a fan base out there that really loves watching you work? Like, by and large, it really has positive reactions
outside
to
of
your
the
takes?
Outside of Chicago.
Right.
I always joke about this in professional wrestling terms. Like, I'm over in Denver. Denver loves me.
Okay.
And if you look at, like, my Instagram stats, like top cities, Chicago, New York, L.A., Denver. Denver loves me, so we're good. I'm good in Cincinnati, really over in Cincinnati as well, and I'm over in Jacksonville.
Oh, okay.
Which is good.
Are you a big T-Law guy? Is that why it is?
You know what? I love T-Law. I'm also an AEW guy, and I also like the Khan family.
You're a big wrestling guy.
Yeah, huge wrestling guy. So so I like Tony Khan, and I like AEW. I've always been a supporter. When Brandy and Cody, when they were in AEW, they were a part of a league we did for the NFL Network. So it was a lot of fun. So we had a relationship with them. And so I'm big in those cities. Used to be big in Seattle. I was the only guy before Super Bowl 48 who not only predicted that the Seahawks would win that game. I said it was going to be a blowout. I said it's not even going to be close. So I was over in Seattle for a long time, except I'm also an Angels fan. I know it's weird.
Beautiful
and
stadium.
the Mariner fans hate me.
Oh,
Listen,
okay.
So I don't mind
The
that.
Mariner fans are in their own world, especially with how their
Yeah.
GM operates. But before we talk about the big game, you mentioned you're a big wrestling fan. Question that we asked a lot of players last night: if you could walk out in the Superdome to any song,
Was that you?
Like,
did you ask Kelsey this?
Yes.
He asked
that was
Kelsey.
our
You
guy,
did
that was
it.
our guy Alex over here.
I was trying to get time with Kelsey, and you just come over the top rope. Like I was waiting patiently, and Alex just
That
was
is
like,
awesome.
"Hey, Travis Kelsey, if you have one entrance music for the WWE, what would it be?" He's like, "What?" He's like, "If you could have," and it was great.
Alex
You did great.
Chipper jammed on
so
Adam
I
Rank.
got
You
it.
heard it here
You
first.
got it.
So-
you jumped the legend here.
So I'll ask you if you could walk into the NFL Network superstar, wow, tangling
studio.
my tongue here. If you could walk into the
Yeah.
NFL Network studio like a WWE superstar, what song are you going with? And then we'll ask your opinions on the big game.
I would probably go with Sabotage.
All right.
I think that it has a great guitar hook because you want the good guitar hook that just starts. Dun, dun, it's undeniable what song it is. Everybody knows it, and the close runner-up would be "Remedy" by the Black Crowes, which
Okay.
you guys probably have no idea. It's an old man's band. Don't worry about it.
Do we have the rights to that on WICB?
Do we have rights?
If you
We're
have the
modern
right,
rock, I
if
don't
you
know.
have if you have Sabotage, go with Sabotage. Otherwise,
We have Creed, we could make it
Remedy's
work.
also.
If
Remedy's
there's one
also
thing
good.
DJ Jess is good about, it's getting the rights to anything that isn't modern rock to
Yeah, we
become
can,
modern
we
rock.
can make that work.
Yeah.
All right.
Black
Adam,
Crowes. I think the BC Boys would allow you to use Sabotage. They use it for commercials.
Yeah.
And all that. By the way, you said you were at Ithaca College.
Yes.
Okay, let me ask you guys something. This
Please.
is
All right.
you guys. It's too late for you now, and that's fine. Ithaca's great. No disrespect.
Oh, no.
No, there's no disrespect. I said this to the Syracuse kids too. Chapman University.
Mm-hmm.
I am a professor at Chapman University. I teach a sports broadcasting class.
Oh, that's awesome.
Chapman University is in Orange, California. It's right down the street from Angel Stadium. It's got great facilities, and it also does not got snow. The
Yeah.
weather.
All right.
Listen,
The weather. You
I'm
guys-
from New York, so I
So
didn't want to
you
go too
guys-
far from home.
I got to start getting the word out there because we're starting to take on USC. So, like, we are you guys.
Yeah.
And Syracuse is USC, and we're trying to change those battles in
Hey,
their state. You
that's
know
I'll
what
make
I'm
you a
saying?
deal. I'll make you a deal right now. You help me get a job at NFL Network, my kid will go take your class. Bang.
Done.
No. All right.
Well,
Adam
let's
Rank,
get
before we
together.
let you go, the one thing we got to do, you're the prediction guy.
Yeah,
Give
bud.
us your Super Bowl 59 prediction.
You know, I hate doing this because it's so foolish to go against the Chiefs, but I'm going to do it. I just really believe that the Eagles, top to bottom, are
Really?
the best roster
Wow.
in the NFL. And I think Saquon Barkley is going to make a huge difference. And Kansas City's played a lot of close games. They have the will to win. They find a way to get it done, and they do it on their own. I'm not going to make any excuses, or I know there's fans out there who think a certain way. It's a great team, and it's a great organization. But there's a reason why it's so difficult to three-peat in sports.
Yeah.
And I think Philadelphia is up for the challenge.
I got one more question for you, and a lot of this stuff has been blown out of proportion by the media, especially surrounding the Chiefs. Are you on the
Yeah.
side of, the Chiefs get support by the refs? Do you think it's overblown? Do you think there's a little bit of both in that conversation?
I think it's overblown, honestly, and
Agreed.
I'm not trying to be a homer or anything like that. But if you enjoy the Premier League, Michael Oliver is a criminal. He is an absolute criminal, and you never see this because MLS, who scored a goal against Man City over the weekend, he would not have been able to play that game if that stupid red card had been upheld, but it wasn't. So you see that happening. The NBA has had scandals with referees doing stuff. There was a the best major league umpire.
Yeah, that was just the other
quit.
day.
That guy's perfect.
His,
Let him bet.
His scorecards are like through the roof.
I would be like, you know what? If he's betting on the games, I want him to keep doing what he's doing. I would encourage, keep doing it. Like, he's the best.
Yeah.
He is the absolute best. I know sometimes it's frustrating for fans when good teams get calls, but sometimes you create your own luck. And honestly, CBS Sports put it out earlier this year, or a couple of weeks ago. They're the fourth, like, teams that get penalties for them. They were the fourth worst. The Bears are the worst, which is the takeaway. But I'm like, does anybody else see that Kansas City's number 4? Like, they don't get a lot of calls. They get big calls. It seems like they get big calls in big instances, but it's the way that goes.
Adam Rank of the NFL Network. Adam, thanks so
Thank
much
you.
for joining me.
All right, thank you so much, and I love that you guys have been looking like it's so. I gotta. Can I paint the picture? here?
Please,
Go.
please do.
It's so difficult because I do this too. Like when we're doing interviews like this, and then you have to always be like on a lookout. Like who else is walking up? Like oh, you're like hey, oh wait, Brandon Marshall. Like you got to run off. So I appreciate you guys being here with me.
Thank you very much.
And having a good time, and keep doing what you're doing. I'm really. It's really awesome to see you guys here. Don't give up. I know there will be a time where you're not making a lot of money, and your friends will go into real estate, and some guy will start selling Bitcoin. Be like, I'm making money or whatever, and you're like, I'm making $4 an hour and whatever. And I know it sucks, and it will suck, and there'll be times you're like, why am I doing this? Remember, like I was there. I did the same thing. Dude, I made $9,000 a year working for a minor league franchise in San Bernardino, California, and I pushed through it. So keep pushing through, keep doing what you're doing. Don't give up on this, all right? Because the only person who gets to decide that you don't get to make it in this business is you. So keep doing what you're doing, keep it up, and can't wait to see you guys running around here all week.
Thank you
you,
very
Adam.
much. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Justin Antonucci joined by Alex Sherman of CNBC Sports. Alex, thanks so much for coming on.
My pleasure. Happy to be here.
How you enjoying New Orleans so far? Is this your first time?
This is my first Radio Row
Oh.
experience, which is honestly I have wanted to experience this since I was a kid. So it is very cool to be here. It's similar to how I thought it would be in terms of the, it's extremely large and it's every media outlet you can imagine that's here. But it's cool to see it, in live in action.
What encapsulates you so much about Radio Row? What drew you to this event? And then we'll get into talking some Chiefs Eagles.
You would just hear it all the time. Like I grew up listening. I'm from the Boston area originally, and grew up listening to Boston sports radio. And every year this would come around, and you would see it on TV, and it was this sort of one time, especially growing up. Like in the 90s in Boston, it was the one time where these local establishments would have this string of national guests because, it was typically so focused on all of the Boston teams. And perhaps perversely, I grew up rooting for non-Boston teams.
What teams?
I'm a huge 49ers fan.
All right. Oh.
I was a big Oakland A's fan growing up. It's hard to root for the A's these days. Not even the Oakland A's anymore. That's sad in itself.
That's a whole other story.
So,
in itself.
anyways, when they would have these national sports media people, or even national athletes, like that always caught my interest because it was rare at the time that you could hear from these people. Of course, now it's so ubiquitous that it doesn't matter where you're from. You can obviously, this stuff is readily available in every different format. But I think that's what piqued my interest. As a kid.
Well, we're here at Radio Row. It's Kansas City Chiefs, Philadelphia Eagles, two very high-profile teams, superstars all over the place. Let's start with the Chiefs, especially how the media covers them. I feel like a lot of times, at least in my opinion, sometimes the hate is overblown. People are sick and tired of the Chiefs. How do you feel like? Do you feel like the media is doing its justice by kind of, smacking on them left and right? Or do you think they need to, relax a little bit because, hey, they are really, really good?
I asked Clark Hunt, the Kansas City Chiefs owner, this question about 3 hours ago. That's the beauty of Radio Row. And look, his answer was more diplomatic than what mine's going to be. What he said was, this is just a product of being good. And he laughs it off, and he doesn't feel like it undermines the team's success. It's just the nature of the business. And he talked about how people used to talk about this with the 90 Chicago Bulls, that Michael Jordan would get at every call. And we went through it with the Patriots, and, they're cheating. And, it's just part of the business that the media attacks the team that's good. Personally, I think that it's a little ridiculous, and that it's fine for fans to talk about this stuff on Twitter or whatever, but for the national media to get so much up involved in it, it strikes me as I wish the media took a little bit more of a harder hand with this, to be like, this is absurd. It's ridiculous. There's no evidence for any of this. Every team goes through different iterations of this, and maybe there are inklings of it that have some legitimacy. Adam Schefter may point out that when or even on some of the broadcasts, and Troy Aikman pointed this out, right? That when Mahomes kind of slows down, he invites late hits.
Yeah.
So like iterations of it, I think are completely legitimate. Like that's an interesting thing to point out, and like I can see that. But some sort of like conspiracy for the league, like that stuff is nonsense, and the media should call it out as nonsense.
I don't know if you saw the Dean Blandino thing about his brother completely convinced that the NFL is rigged. I thought that was really funny. But let's talk about Saquon Barkley and the Eagles. There was that famous clip of John Mara just last year saying that he will be sick to his stomach if
On
Saquon
Hard
Barkley,
Knocks, right,
yes.
yeah.
From a business perspective, how much more do you think the Giants lost out on that outside of just the play on the football field?
I mean, it looks worse today than it ever has, certainly, with Barkley advancing to the Super Bowl. And, like, it could look even worse a week from now if he's the MVP of the Super Bowl. All of the merchandise lost with that, the sponsorship opportunities that would extend to the broader team. Now, look, were the Giants ever going to make the Super Bowl? Like, no. So we do know that part of this is that you inserted Barkley into the right team, and therefore you're able to maximize his usage both from a football standpoint and a business standpoint. But, yeah, that decision doesn't look very good today for the Giants for sure.
And let's talk about the Eagles. We talked about Patrick Mahomes as well. How do the Eagles stop Mahomes? I mean, this guy is a guy who put up 38 points on them just 2 years ago. You're a 49ers fan. You saw how good Mahomes can be in late moments. The Eagles, though, they're back a second time. You have to think that they have learned to sit. You have the same head coach, a lot of veterans returning. What's different this time around for the Eagles if they want to win this game?
Honestly, I've reached the point now where I don't think there is any stopping Pat Mahomes in a big game. Like it's just that this has happened too many times in games of significance where you've had a variety of different defensive coordinators put together plans around him, and nothing works. But what I will say is that containing his scrambling ability is huge. Over and over again, you see in big games Mahomes coming up by making key runs on 3rd and long, on 4th down. Like, if Vic Fangio can design something that contains his scrambling ability or limits even the pure amount of times that he runs the ball, I think they'll go a long way toward being able to win the game.
And I want to ask about Nick Sirianni because he's kind of come back from the dead in his spot with the Eagles, where now he's revitalized himself and put him in a spot to win a Super Bowl. What do you think the catalyst has been for Sirianni, and how much do you think he's extended his lifeline in Philadelphia?
I think he got better coordinators. I think he got Kellen Moore and Vic Fangio, and that revolutionized it for Sirianni. I think their coordinators last year were sort of a disaster. So he was smart enough to make those changes. He was able to get one of the top defensive coordinators in the league to come in. He's probably going to lose Kellen Moore now to the Saints as a head coaching job, so he'll need to come up with a new offensive coordinator again. But, look, I said it at the time because, as a 49ers fan, Vic Fangio used to be the defensive coordinator for the Niners under Jim Harbaugh, and he was so good as the defensive coordinator. I remember talking to my friends that I really wanted the Niners to bring in Fangio, and when the Eagles got him, I was like, look, this may be the best free agent signing of player or coach that happens this offseason. Now, perhaps Saquon Barkley ended up being the best free agent signing if you include players, but Fangio might be number 2. Not only because he's such a good defensive coordinator year after year after year, designing different systems, putting the right people in play, but also I don't think he's going to become a head coach. So you've got a guy as a defensive coordinator that you can now bring along for a series of years for as long as he wants to do the job. So that was a real coup for the Eagles.
And I'm glad you brought up the defensive coordinator. I want to talk some Niners because you're a big Niners fan. We see a lot of times there's this mold of sometimes there's just really, really good defensive coordinators that are not built to be head coaches. And I feel like Robert Saleh, he only had one shot, but he was one of those guys, and he's an excellent defensive coordinator, especially in his first tenure with the 49ers. How do you feel about that signing for them? And even so, the outlook of this team, who has been at the height of football these last couple years, was so close and then missed the playoffs this year.
The 49ers strategy to sign a defensive coordinator was Robert Saleh and then no real plan B.
Yeah.
So I think that speaks to how urgent it was for the Niners to get him. He is like the head coach of the defense, and it allows Kyle Shanahan to not have to spend time worrying about the defense and sort of co-coaching. And I think he's had to co-coach the last 2 seasons, both with Steve Wilks and Nick Sorensen. So that, I think, it goes quite a long way to being able to focus more on the game management, on the offensive game plan. He clearly has a lot of trust in Robert Saleh, who's now done it twice, both with the Jets and the 49ers, concocting top defenses. So, again, I do think that the Niners risk losing him to another head coaching job. I don't think it is a slam dunk that he won't get another one. He was a coaching candidate even this year for a few different teams. I didn't think he would get the job this year, given he was just coming off the Jets. But, you know, if the Niners win the Super Bowl next year and he's the defensive coordinator, it would not surprise me at all if he was a coach even a year from now.
And you got a quarterback in Brock Purdy who's up for a contract next year. He's the last overall pick in the draft. People are like, is he going to get paid? Is he going to get shafted a little bit? What are your thoughts on what the Brock Purdy contract might look like? Especially, we've seen quarterbacks like Jordan Love after just one season get ridiculous contracts. In my opinion, I believe Brock Purdy deserves the money. I know a lot of people don't. I think the market kind of plays itself out, but I want to know what you think about that.
Yeah, I 100% think he deserves the money, and I think he'll get a huge contract. The Niners tend to have these complex structures that make the headline contract seem really player-friendly, and then if you go into the weeds, it's actually very team-friendly. They've done this a number of times. Jimmy Garoppolo comes to mind, where that he was sort of the highest-paid quarterback based on sort of the superficial numbers at the time. But then if you kind of got into the weeds, it was really just like a series of one-year deals where there was no guaranteed money beyond a certain point. So it wouldn't surprise me if the structure of the Purdy contract were more team-friendly than a lot of other quarterback contracts have been. But if you're just going to look at sort of overall dollars and years, Purdy's going to get paid a lot. The Niners clearly are all in on him, and he deserves it. I mean, he got injured in his first year. He could have easily gone to the Super Bowl that year. Then he goes to the Super Bowl his next year. The team was ravaged by injuries this year. In year 3, it wasn't all that much I thought Purdy could do about it. But, I mean, you can't really have a better resume in your first 3 seasons than he's had.
And I want to go down to Jerry's world, especially with how he's been running the Cowboys for the last couple of years. You're into business. Do you think that this model is eventually just going to completely collapse on the Dallas Cowboys to a point where there might be no coming back within this next potential decade? Because the way that Jerry Jones has set up his team, he's paying Dak Prescott a boatload of money, and yet he refused to budge on CeeDee Lamb. He's refusing to budge on Micah Parsons. Then with the whole Mike McCarthy thing, it seems like the business model he's running is just completely unsustainable.
They are in the running for the worst run sports franchise, which is unbelievable to me because in the 90s, again, they were the golden child of sports franchises. And it's just decision after decision that franchise makes that I scratch my head at. The coaching stuff has been a mess. Again, just to turn it back to the Niners briefly, they traded for Trey Lance. They traded a 4th-round pick for Trey Lance and then made him the 3rd-string quarterback. Lance needs reps, but they were never going to give him reps, not only because they have Prescott, but also they had Cooper Rush already, who was the backup. So that trade made absolutely no sense. They literally just handed away a 4th-round pick. Plus, they had to pay Lance like $5 million to $7 million to be their 3rd-string quarterback and then not give him the reps to develop. The whole thing didn't make any sense from the jump, and it really gets me to wonder, like, I just feel if you're making decisions like that and you're making the coaching decisions that they have made, there just strikes me as no way out as long as Jerry Jones is running the franchise.
I feel like sorry about that.
No, it's just there's too much evidence now for this.
And I feel like the worst part about that is Cooper Rush starts the whole second half of the season, and then they finally start Trey Lance because they don't want to pay Cooper Rush an incentive. One last question for you. We're asking everyone who comes on this show, who's winning the big game and what's your score prediction?
I think the exact same thing that I thought last year, which is that last year I thought the Niners were the better team overall, but I was like, you can't bet against Mahomes. And this year I think the Eagles are the better team, but I refuse to bet against Mahomes. So I think the Chiefs will win by, 1 to 3 points like they've done in every other game this season.
Score prediction?
I'll say 27-25 Chiefs.
All right, lower scoring. Alex Sherman of CNB Sports. Thank you so much for coming on the show.